Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, and I got a World War III alert. We got a World War III alert, but before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, they want us all to die soon, y'all. I know they're in their bunkers. Where's Biden at right now? In his nuclear bunker. They have assassinated Russia's top nuclear protection force commander after Putin has been warning them what he would do to him. The U.S. and Ukraine, they puppets say, oh, yeah, we'll kill your nuclear general.
The top Russian general in charge of Russia's radiation, chemical, and biological protection force was killed in a blast in Moscow. And according to sources, Ukraine has claimed responsibility for the killing of Lieutenant General. And according to the investigation committee, a bomb was planted in an electric scooter, which was placed near an apartment building around 7 kilometers away from Kremlin. The photographs circulated on social media sites show a shattered entrance to a building littered with rubble and 2 bodies lying in the snow. Investigators and forensic teams are working together at the scene to examine the details of the blast.
Now, this act of terrorism won't
At first,
go
we thought that
unpunished.
cement might have been unloaded or something similar, but the blast was so loud that it did not seem like construction work. It was very scary.
Now, this comes days after Ukraine accused Kirillov of using banned chemical weapons to target Kiev. The UK placed sanctions on Kirillov for using riot control agents, and also multiple reports of the use of toxic choking agents in Ukraine.
That's a lie. That man ain't used no chemical weapons in Ukraine, but that doesn't matter because you see they didn't kill the nuclear commander in Russia. In Russia thinking about some retaliation now. And you know the U.S., they love this.
Breaking overnight, the leader of Russia's nuclear protection forces killed in a bombing in Moscow. Russian officials say the bomb was hidden inside an electric scooter and detonated remotely outside an apartment building today. The Russian general was wanted by Ukraine for using chemical weapons. A source with knowledge of the operation telling CNN Ukraine's security service was behind the assassination. Max Foster joins us live now from London with more on this. Max, good morning. A remarkable event here. Tell us more about who this general is and why the Ukrainians wanted to do this.
Well, what a brazen assassination on the streets of Moscow, just 4 miles from the Kremlin, a remote-controlled bomb planted on an electric scooter. And they got their man, because very quickly we heard from sources within Ukraine that this was a revenge attack. This was a general who ran the forces that look after the nuclear weapons, the chemical weaponry, and the Ukrainians had very clearly accused him specifically of ordering the use of chemical weapons effectively on the battlefield against the Ukrainian military. So they targeted him, they got him just 4 miles from the Kremlin, as I say. So a massive breach of security for the Russians. We wait to hear their response, but you know, you could call it a triumph for the Ukrainians, but there will be a response as well to this.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Max, I mean, this is an intriguing time, I suppose, for Russia, considering, of course, the fall of Assad in Syria, where, of course, Russians were, they've given him asylum there, and Putin making an appearance in public without even mentioning what was going on there, really, in many ways, an embarrassment for them and potential security problems since they have access to a warm water port through Syria. Now something like this, and to have the Ukrainians talking about it in public, it seems like Putin is under some pressure, no?
Certainly. I mean, Syria was, Russia's only base, really, a reliable base within the Middle East. They've still got their military installations there. I'm sure there's some negotiation going on between the Syrian regime as it is now and the Russians about protecting those assets, whether or not they'll be able to stay. But losing, under major pressure within Syria, in the Middle East, also clearly under pressure in Ukraine. They have been pretty successful, though, on the battlefield, pushing forward on those front lines. So they've been claiming triumphs on the battle in Ukraine. But this is a major blow, a big embarrassment, which it does show some vulnerability. To think that you could attack anyone in central Moscow as a Ukrainian agent is pretty extraordinary, let alone
that's called terrorism.
A top general who was specifically targeted.
Right. Well, and I mean, those electric scooters, they're all over cities around the world. I mean, what a sort of sinister use of that technology. But of course, all this, coming as the Russians are scrambling to take territory in Ukraine ahead of President-elect Donald Trump coming into office, and Zelensky mounting a charm offensive to try to win him over. Quite a complicated battlefield, I suppose you could call it. Max Foster for us this morning. Max, thank you. I really appreciate it.
So let's get to CNN's Claire Sebastian now. I mean, it goes without saying that this was a brazen assassination on Russian soil. Are we hearing anything from Ukraine thus far, Claire?
Well, yeah, Emma, as Fred said, what we have is not a direct claim of responsibility from Ukraine, but it comes via a source familiar with the operation who says that this was an operation of Ukraine's security services. The source calling Lieutenant General Kirillov a war criminal, saying that he was an absolutely legitimate target and that retribution for war crimes is inevitable. I think, look, as Fred was pointing out, it is very clear why General Kirillov was targeted. He was not only wanted in Ukraine as of yesterday, the timing, of course, significant there. He'd also been sanctioned, well, Russia, in fact, had been sanctioned by the UK and the US for its use of banned chemical substances, riot agents, and the like on Ukraine. And the UK had also specifically sanctioned Kirillov himself, saying that he was helping deploy these chemical substances, chemical weapons. So he was clearly viewed by Ukraine and its allies as a very destructive, dangerous force in this war. He was also, by the way, an expert at deploying disinformation. He was a key mouthpiece for some of the more out there conspiracy theories that we've heard from Russia regarding Ukraine, including this well-worn accusation that Ukraine was building a dirty bomb. This first surfaced in the autumn of 2022, and that it was going to try and pin the blame for it on Russia. He was someone who talked fairly regularly and, in fact, fairly recently about that. He also recently said that Ukraine's main priority when invading the Kursk region of Russia was to seize the nuclear power plant there, something, of course, Ukraine has denied. So that's, I think, why he was targeted. But this, in terms of ambition, given his rank, given the proximity to the center of Moscow, given the ingenuity, this was, of course, we believe, according to Russian state media reports, a bomb hidden inside a scooter. This, I think, reveals a level of ambition that we haven't yet seen from Ukraine, and certainly is not a good look for Russia's internal security apparatus.
Sure is not. Claire Sebastian, good to have you as always. Thank you very much. A source tells CNN, a source with knowledge of an operation says Ukraine's security services were behind the assassination. Is that the view of the White House?
Nah, y'all did it. The U.S. did it.
We're still processing all this information coming in overnight, Kate. I'm not in a position today to say definitively exactly what happened here, who was responsible. We're going to be obviously diving into it as best we can, certainly talking to the Ukrainians about what they know. But I'm not in a position here this morning to give out a whole lot more information about it.
Totally understand that. Kirillov, this man, he's been sanctioned by the UK for the way it was described, abhorrent use of inhumane chemical weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Lies.
The Biden administration sanctioned Russia in May for chemical weapons use against Ukrainian forces. What does it mean to have this man off the battlefield, so to speak, into this ongoing war?
Well, again, I want to be careful not to speak to this particular event, but writ large, it is without question that the Russian military has committed atrocities on the Ukrainian people, that the Russian military, with orders from on high, have used chemical weapons and other agents to kill, to maim, to hurt the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian soldiers. And all of that is being documented so that Russia can be properly held to account. What we're going to be focused on here is making sure that we continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons and the material they need to succeed on the battlefield.
You just killed the Russian general, boy. Your ass need to be in that bunker. Where's Biden at? He need to talk to the American people. Why y'all killed the top Russian nuclear forces general, man? Y'all putting our life in danger. That's an act of terrorism. You see, let's hear this British guy explain to us how that's terrorism.
Michael, are you surprised? Are you shocked that Ukraine's able to carry out such an attack, an assassination, so close to the Kremlin?
Well, not so surprised, Wilf, because they've shown that they're quite audacious in doing this sort of thing. Yeah, it's not that easy to plant a bomb so near to the Kremlin in the Ryabinsky prospect. But nevertheless, they did it. And the SBU, the Secret Service, and also the GUR, the military intelligence branch of the Ukrainian forces, are actually very good at doing this sort of thing. And also, Russia's domestic security really isn't very good. I mean, we saw that in the Crocus attacks that were nothing to do with Ukraine. Remember the big arena attacks, the Crocus arena attacks of last year? It was very easy for an Islamist group to plant a series of bombs inside a concert venue. I mean, because Moscow has not been used to dealing with terrorism, really, it's actually more open than a lot of Russians would like to believe. So the Ukrainians have actually made their point that they arraigned this man, Kirillov, as a war criminal yesterday because of his involvement in chemical weapons attacks on the battlefield, and he's been killed today. That's very clear symbolism, and they've admitted it, which is not what they normally do. They normally just keep quiet about it and let the rest of the world make up their own minds. So this is clearly a tactic by Kiev to shake the Russians and show something to the rest of the world.
Michael, what are the rules of engagement for something like this under international law, or at least convention and precedent? Obviously, the word terrorism has been used by the Russians. Is that a fair word to use, or is this totally legitimate action by Ukraine?
No, it is a fair word. It is a terrorist act, exactly as the Russians have tried to commit many, many terrorist acts in Ukraine. I mean,
terrorist act. You see, the man, he tell the truth every once in a while. It is a terrorist act. What the terrorists in Ukraine just killed the Russian general, along with NATO and the U.S. It's a terrorist act to blow up people with scooters in civilian areas, but you reap what you sow.
Zelensky has survived at least 3 assassination attempts that we know of, and probably quite a lot more. Some say 6 or 7. So both sides are using what is, in any definition, terrorism against each other because they're involved in a war. Now, in Russia's case, they're supposed to be involved in a special military operation, not a war. And if we were doing that, Britain would not resort to terrorism. The Ukrainians are fighting a war for survival, so they do resort to terrorism. There's a sort of there's not a moral equivalence in that, but there is you can understand why they do it, but it does put them into the wrong category for this sort of thing. But they argue that this man is, from their point of view, a war criminal. He's sanctioned internationally. They have some sort of right to go after him.
Does this hurt Putin in terms of what the domestic audience make of it, or oddly does it strengthen some of the arguments that he's...
See, this is where the U.S. become hypocrites at. Nobody ever take him seriously. Okay, that means Benjamin Netanyahu, he could be assassinated anywhere by Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran. He's been sanctioned internationally, and he's a war criminal. That's what the ICC said. You see, today they're going to take it back and say, no, that's not fair. Well, that's what y'all keep saying. When y'all try to target people and then y'all let this type of nonsense go on, they just setting themselves up for Russia, China, whoever, to sanction them, say they did whatever, and then just whack them in the public like this. You reap what you sow. Remember I said that. And they can laugh on TV and say, oh, Putin's embarrassed and Russia's not safe. Okay.
He's making to his citizens.
Yeah, well, I think both. It will strengthen the narrative of the Russians that they're fighting terrorists, they're fighting Nazis and ultra right wingers in Ukraine. Yeah. So that's part of the narrative, and that hasn't changed for the last more than 2 or 3 years, actually. But it will actually weaken Putin in the sense that it brings the war back to Moscow just before Christmas. Here we are with another attack, a very specific targeted attack on a military figure, right within the center of Moscow. This is as symbolic as having drones, hit the domes in the Kremlin, which happened over a year ago now. So it does make a point, and it's a small victory, if you like, for Kiev in a very dirty war.
What will the West think about this, Mike? I mean, obviously, this wasn't using an ATACMS or a Storm Shadow or something provided by the West, but clearly it is an attack right at the heart of Russia by a country that the West is providing weapons to. Would they have preferred Ukraine not to do this, or be pleased that they've had this success?
I think they'll be secretly pleased about it, and they see this as all part of the bargaining process up to January, when we all anticipate that the war will begin to change with the incoming President Trump. Remember, the Russians are pushing every button they can find at the moment to gain advantage over Ukraine, and Ukraine are pushing their buttons to do the same. So I think that the Western world will feel that this is, in a sense, justified, even though they don't really want to justify it legally. And remember, the Russians have been using riot control agents, CS gas, interestingly, I mean, CS gas is available to use as a riot control agent, though it's pretty severe, but it's banned as a weapon of war by the Chemical Weapons Convention.
And that's crazy. They say that it's banned. That's what the damn police use on every right. They was using it on Black Lives Matter. They use it at the Capitol. That's what the police use. It's riot control agents. It is banned by the Chemical Weapons Treaty. Now, yes, you're right. It's banned. Why are you using it on American citizens? Why are they using it on us? It's absolute. They use it in prisons. Imagine that. Mace. Don't you know a can of mace? That's a chemical weapon. That's banned. It's a weapon of war. Do you see how petty these people is? These people saying Putin is using mace in Ukraine. He's a chemical weapons criminal. Man, these people are disgusting.
It's used in very high lethal concentrations. They've been using it. The Russians have been using it on their gas grenades, this K-51 grenade. They've been dropping thousands of them with very high concentrations of CS gas and cyanide all over the battlefield. So there's no question that the Russians are breaking international law and committing war crimes on a systematic basis.
What a joke. You talking about some sore losers. You talking about you get your ass whooped on the battlefield. This is what they resort to. Chemical weapons. He's Hitler. Man, this is disgusting. But okay. Because they think Russia gonna let them kill the top general who over the nuclear protection forces and get away with it. These people crazy. But they don't give a damn about Ukraine. They won't Putin to blow shit up.
We need to strengthen Ukraine. So now 2025 is not going to be the year of peace, as I've anticipated a long time ago. This is going to be the year of strengthening Ukraine, which is basically a continuation of 2024, 2023, and so on. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today is Tuesday, December the 17th, and this is my first video update of the day. There's a lot of things which have happened in the last 24 hours, and I want to cover most of it in this first episode. Basically, I have 3 news stories for you. The first one is something that you and I have anticipated for a long time, but now we finally have the confirmation of it. The second news story, well, that's bad news. And the third one, that's some very bad news. So this episode is probably going to be a nice crescendo of bad news. The closer we get to the end of the episode, the worse the news gets. So let's play this game by going over to Ukrainska Pravda for the daily dose of truth. Russia ready to negotiate with those who are prepared to accept reality, Russia's representative to the United Nations says. Nebenzia, speaking during the Security Council meeting, said that any scenarios for freezing the war, which were discussed during the meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky, Donald Trump, and Emmanuel Macron, are unacceptable to the Kremlin. This is something that we have discussed at length over the last couple of weeks, and from what I've got from the comment section, you and I were in perfect agreement on the fact that Russia will not accept a ceasefire. This is a scenario that would very much be preferred by the West, because Ukraine is in dire straits and they want to strengthen Ukraine during that freezing of hostilities. This is the plan, to buy some more time for Ukraine to rearm and regroup, but this is something that Russia would never agree to. And now Mr. Nebenzia gives us the confirmation. Let's see what Mr. Nebenzia actually stated. In addition, Nebenzia said that Zelensky's peace initiatives were an attempt to buy time to strengthen the fight against Russia and revive new military assistance. He said Russia was ready to negotiate, but only with those ready to accept reality and end the war. Well, this is a surprise to nobody. But my friends, what does Mr. Nebenzia mean when he says reality on the ground? I think it's quite simple, and once you draw the line, it becomes crystal clear. Ukraine has lost this war already, and from this point onwards, it's just a matter of how much more territory they're willing to lose. But they've lost it already. The Russians are advancing on every imaginable part of the front. There's not a single pocket of space where Ukraine is doing very well. They're having massive shortages in manpower, and this is according to their own admission. This is not Russian propaganda. They're saying it themselves. The Western support for Ukraine is also decreasing. Ukraine doesn't have good news for the battlefield. This is what Mr. Nebenzia means. And just to emphasize how bad it actually is, let me take you over to this next article, because this one shows you the developments just in the last 24 hours. Russians occupy Hanivka in Donetsk Oblast and advance near 9 settlements, says Deep State. By the way, Deep State is a Ukrainian source. Analysts from the Deep State project reported on the 9th of 16th to 17th of December, that was last night, that the Russians have occupied the village of Hanivka in Donetsk Oblast. Basically, it was the mini cauldron that I've showed you guys yesterday. It's the same one, now it's gone. In addition, analysts reported Russian advances near the settlements of Dalnie, Uspenivka, Pishane, Storozheve, Trudove, Kurakove, Sevchenko, and Konstantinopolske. The Russians have also advanced near Kruglenkoe in Russia's Kursk Oblast. Translation, the Russians are advancing all across the Eastern Front and in Kursk as well. This is the reality on the ground that Mr. Nebenzia, Vladimir Putin, and many others are talking about. Mr. Nebenzia is basically saying, look, Ukraine has lost, so Ukraine doesn't get to dictate how this conflict ends. They don't get to impose conditions. They don't get to send ultimatums. They're in no position to dictate anything. And also, this is a very clear signal and a message to the West saying, look, your proxy has lost. So you're not in that position either. You also don't get to dictate the terms, the ceasefires, or any of it. Basically, this message is as clear as it can possibly be. But do we think that the West will be receptive to it? I think some leaders in the West will probably look at it with a little bit more common sense, but most of them, the vast majority of them, I think they'll just choose to bury their head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. They will still pretend that Ukraine is doing just fine. And do you know how I know that? Well, because that takes me to the second news story, the one that I said it's bad news. Well, this is about the United Kingdom and Mr. Keir Starmer. Listen to this. UK wants to ensure Ukraine has strongest possible position in 2025, says the UK Prime Minister. Starmer stated that strengthening Ukraine's position includes using mechanisms such as economic sanctions and the Shadow Fleet initiative to combat critical income sources that fund Russian leader Vladimir Putin's war machine. As I've warned you, my friends, from this point onwards, the news only gets progressively worse in this episode. People just magically choose to look the other way and pretend reality is not knocking at its door. That's really what they're doing. Mr. Starmer, he declares that his priorities are to strengthen Ukraine and to make sure that Ukraine is in the best possible position for the peace negotiations. But look at what he's saying. He's saying that this is the goal for 2025. So 2025, in other words, in Keir Starmer's words, would be, well, we're not going to talk about any peace talks. Oh, no. This is the year when we get Ukraine to be stronger. This is how they're wording it. And it's not just him. All these leaders in Europe, not in the United States, but in Europe, they're all singing the same song. No matter if you look at Kaja Kallas, von der Leyen, Starmer, all of them. Well, we need to strengthen Ukraine. So now 2025 is not going to be the year of peace, as I've anticipated a long time ago. This is going to be the year of strengthening Ukraine, which is basically a continuation of 2024, 2023, and so on. This is the plan. But what really shocks me is that Keir Starmer decides to make these statements just on the eve of the latest news about the UK economy. It was less than 24 hours ago when the Financial Times has published an article in which they basically showcase just how bad the UK economy actually is getting. Let me take you over to this article. I'm not going to spend too much time because there's one graph which will tell more than I could ever tell you here, but I want to show it to you. UK private sector employment shrinks at fastest pace since 2021. Actually, is at the fastest pace since 2008. UK companies are cutting employee numbers at the fastest rate since the coup, according to a closely watched survey that highlights the impact of Rachel Reeves's tax-raising budget. Chris Williamson, chief business economist at S&P Global Market Intelligence, said, firms are responding to the increase in national insurance contributions and the new regulations around staffing, with a marked pullback in hiring, causing employment to fall in December at the fastest rate since the global financial crisis in 2009, if the pandemic is excluded. Take a look at this graph, my friends, because it speaks volumes. In fact, it speaks more than 1,000 words ever could. This gives you an ample picture of what's going on here. All the major economists agree upon something. The situation in the UK is shocking. It's dire. The prices are through the roof. There's no more affordable housing. There's barely any housing at all to begin with. The rent prices, well, they're skyrocketing. And the mortgage interest rates, well, that's the final nail in the coffin. This is how life in the UK has really become. But Keir Starmer, no. His priorities are to strengthen Ukraine. That's really the most pressing issue. My friends, let me move on to the last article, the very bad news, before my blood pressure gets even higher. Ukraine assassinates Russian chemical weapons chief in Moscow bombing. Kiev has charged the top general with orchestrating numerous attacks with banned weapons. A few hours later, he was dead. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, commander of the nuclear, biological, and chemical forces of the Russian army, died in a blast as he was heading out of a residential block in Moscow, the Russian Investigative Committee said in a statement. An explosive device was hidden in an electric scooter parked nearby. Kirillov's aide also died in the attack, the Investigative Committee said, announcing a criminal investigation. Ukraine Security Service, SBU, claimed responsibility for Kirillov's murder, a Ukrainian law enforcement official told Politico after being granted anonymity to discuss the sensitive topic. These are some very despicable acts, and unfortunately, we see more and more of these by the day. This is also a confirmation of what's really going on with the Ukrainian army. They're in an impossible situation on the battlefield. So these despicable acts are the Kiev regime's way of fighting back. This is their way of compensating for what they cannot do on the battlefield. Also, my friends, very important, this is also a way to ensure that this conflict will not be over even after it is technically over. Because these things, they do have consequences for decades to come. These have more consequences than what's really going on the battlefield. This has always been the case in history when these things have happened before. But Moscow has indeed responded to this, and none other than Dmitry Medvedev issued a statement. And I know people say, well, Dmitry Medvedev, you can't really take him seriously. I think you'd better take him seriously when he says this. Ukraine to face imminent revenge for killing of Russian generals, says Dmitry Medvedev. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, has said the Ukrainian leadership will face imminent revenge for killing of Kirillov, RIA News agency is reporting. Quote, realizing the inevitability of its military defeat, Ukraine launches cowardly and despicable strikes in peaceful cities, Medvedev said. Ukraine has undertaken many of such actions since this conflict began. The Russians, on the other hand, they prefer to keep their quarrels and their problems on the battlefield where they belong. If the Russians would have done the same exact things, my friends, you and I would never hear the end of it. The Western mainstream media would top the headlines with such things day in and day out, condemning Russia. But because it's Ukraine doing it, do you see any backlash? Do you see anything from the Western mainstream media or from Western politicians? No, they're not even approaching this subject. There's not a single one who brings up these things into the conversation. My friends, I'll leave this episode here, but stay tuned for the second video update, which should come in just a couple of hours. I wish you a good rest of the afternoon, and I'll see you very soon.
Today is Tuesday, December 17, 2024. Apologies for the late start. Professor Jeffrey Sachs joins us now. Professor Sachs, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I want to speak at some length about what's going on in Syria, particularly the reprehensible land grabs in which the IDF has been engaging. Ambassador Murray told us this morning that the IDF has seized land equivalent to 3 times the size of the Gaza Strip. But before we get there was an assassination this morning of a very high-ranking general, General Kirillov, outside of his apartment building in Moscow. It was startling, and he and his aide were killed by a bomb. The Ukrainians have taken credit, so to speak, for it. What does this tell you, Professor Sachs, about the state of the war between Russia and Ukraine, that Ukraine would do something like this?
This kind of terrorism should have no place, even in the context of war. But what it means is that we are continuing to be at the brink of disaster, that at any moment this war could spiral into something even more god-awful than it is right now, into escalation, nuclear escalation. What is happening is that governments or leaders are saying, we have no respect for any limits. And this is especially, by the way, and I know people will take exception to this, but this is on, quote, our side, the US, Ukraine, Israel. We are murdering foreigners that are, yes, adversaries, but are often negotiators or senior officials of government. This is state policy of Ukraine. They didn't even try to hide this. They, as you said, took credit for it. The United States murders foreign officials. And by the way, I think it's true to say domestic people as well. And Israel absolutely has been in the business for decades of murdering its so-called or self-defined adversaries. But in particular, in the last couple of years, the ones that it's murdered are its political interlocutors, the very ones aiming to negotiate ceasefires or peace agreements. The political negotiator of Hamas, the leader of Hezbollah, and these are outright assassinations. These are not killings that are in the context of military actions where buildings or blocks or cities are bombed. These are targeted assassinations. Well, my God, where are we going with all of this? I can tell you, the longer this continues, the more danger that we just end up all getting blown up.
You know, this was so well planned, so methodical, so neat and clean, so to speak. It's almost as if the Mossad did it, but
well, by the way, there's a lot of interaction of the CIA, the Mossad, the Ukrainian intelligence. Yes, these are methods that are championed by, again, I'll say it, quote, our side, although you don't really feel it's much for us, the normal people. But these are deliberate methods, and you won't hear complaints or scoffing. Not at all. It may have been done together with the US. Who knows? And when Israel does these things, murdering the very people that they're negotiating with, the US doesn't blink an eye, because probably it's been done together with the US. It's so astoundingly reckless and dangerous.
Our former intelligence community colleagues of yours that are on the show have nothing but praise for the professionalism of the Russian intelligence community. I'm sure that they will soon find out who's behind it. I'm going to run a clip from President Putin. Now, this is before the murder of the general. This was yesterday when he was addressing a large contingent of his senior defense folks. I'd like your thoughts on it, Chris. Cut number 13.
At the same time, under the guise of a mythical Russian threat, they simply scare their population with the fact that we are going to attack someone. The tactics are very simple. They bring us to the red line through which we are retreating from the ancient Soviet Union, now Russian threats. Meanwhile, the NATO countries themselves are increasing military spending near the Russian borders. The formation and cobbling together of NATO have long gone beyond the so-called zone of its historical responsibility. In addition, the so-called Eastern Flank, the alliance is increasing its presence in the Asia-Pacific region. With the support of the United States, new military and political alliances are being formed that undermines the security architecture that has developed over decades.
I think he's got his finger right on the pulse of things. By the way, the general that was murdered was in the audience. He wasn't shown in the clip that we saw, but he was there.
We're heading towards World War III, and this is actually chortled in Washington. War with China by 2027, and so on. If the Biden or Biden-Harris administration had continued, we would go right over the cliff. The question now that is extremely important is whether Donald Trump will do something different, and he might. By the way, there is, at least in his rhetoric, repeatedly statements that we should not be at war with Russia. We should not be at war with China. He says that repeatedly. I'm taking some cautious hope from it, because if it's real, it's a huge advance on what we have of this outgoing administration, which has been absolutely dreadful, which has made it its point to be absolutely disrespectful and caustic and even murderous about the red lines of our adversaries. Now, the issue with the incoming Trump administration is that that there are people of all ilks in Washington in the new administration. Some stated hardliners, some people who say we've had enough war, we have to end the war. We have President Trump's rhetoric. We have 3 war zones, by the way. Of course, we have Ukraine, we have the Middle East, and we have East Asia. And some people say, oh, war in this one, but not in this one. Some say, why are we provoking World War III in any of these places? Donald Trump has talked about that he doesn't want war with China, that the two countries could solve problems together. Well, if such rhetoric is actually turned into action and addresses what President Putin accurately stated in that clip, he stated accurately that there is a massive Western US-led military buildup that is taking place across all of these conflict zones, and that it's extraordinarily dangerous. If President Trump aims to wind this down, my own view is give him 3 Nobel Peace Prizes, one for ending the Ukraine war, one for ending the violence in the Middle East, and one for ending the potential utter disaster in East Asia. If he does it, and this is the big question for us.
Well, and then you and I, before we get to Syria, you and I this morning each read a reprehensible piece by Mitch McConnell, the outgoing majority leader in the Senate, which sounded like John McCain on steroids. And I fear that that view, that America must continue its hegemony, that America must dominate, I fear that that view is shared by more than half the Republican senators, well more than half.
Yeah, so the key word in this piece, which people can download from Foreign Affairs magazine because it's made I think, openly available for everybody, is primacy.
Right.
What Mitch McConnell says is we need U.S. primacy. What U.S. primacy means to Russia or to China is the U.S. wants to lord it over us. The U.S. wants to dominate us. The U.S. wants to have its way and threaten us as it will. What it literally means in the case of Russia is the U.S. wants to put its missile systems and its military bases in Ukraine along our border or in the South Caucasus, in Georgia, and in fact do whatever the U.S. wants. That's what primacy means from the Russian point of view. It's, of course, a matter of core national security for Russia to reject such a world that Mitch McConnell is calling for. What primacy means in East Asia is that the United States surrounds China with its military in Japan, in Korea, or in Australia, New Zealand, in Southeast Asia, in the East China Sea, in the South China Sea, in the choke points in the Indian Ocean and the Straits of Malacca, that the U.S. puts in intermediate range missiles in Korea or wherever it wants. From China's point of view, again, this is fundamentally against China's core national security, especially when they saber rattle about Taiwan and so forth, which is part of China, and the United States says is part of China. So when Mitch McConnell talks about primacy, we have to understand from the point of view of the other parties, they see this as dire and direct threat to their core national security. Is that really making America safe by making Russia feel that they're absolutely at the brink or on the knife edge of war? Does it really make the American people safe when China feels that the United States is threatening China's core national security? Of course it doesn't. It leads to a world in which we are at each other's throats and we're seconds away from nuclear war. And as we've talked about, the doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists puts us at 90 seconds to nuclear Armageddon. So Mitch McConnell expresses, yes, a popular view that is absolutely insane. I'm sorry to say it. It's insane. It is a view that says we're going to act in a way which is going to put us to the very brink of nuclear war. Why would any U.S. politician say such a stupid thing? But of course, Mitch McConnell's an old and stupid man, I'm sorry to say. Go, leave already. This is so dangerous for us. And to see this after 30 years of this kind of claim of U.S. primacy that has gotten us into nonstop wars in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, in Ukraine, that is leading to massive arms buildups around China and a surge of China's own military spending in response to the U.S. military spending. Enough of this. This is 30 years of delusion that has brought us to the brink of nuclear war. And it's really time for Mitch McConnell to leave, but at least he did us a slight favor by being so blunt about the idiocy of the foreign policy that he promotes. So reckless and so dangerous and so lacking the most basic core insight that if we want to be safe, you don't put the knife on the throat of the other side when it's a nuclear superpower and expect that's going to make us safe.
Right. Professor Sachs, switching gears, does Syria still exist as a geopolitical entity?
No, not for the moment, because it is multiple military forces that are fighting each other, that are dividing up the country. And we have Turkish-backed jihadist forces. We have American-backed Kurdish forces. We have the Russian presence on the coast. We have Israel having invaded Syria 3 days ago. We have these absolute madmen in the Israeli government, two ministers, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are mad, absolutely mad, saying, yes, this is greater Israel now. This is where we stand. And all of this is pointing towards wider war. And of course, Netanyahu, always for dragging America into yet another war, wants to drag us into a war with Iran now. And that's part of the immediate plan, not even hidden from view. Israel has bombed the air defenses of Syria, and there are stories coming right and left that, of course, this gives an open airspace for the United States entry to bomb Iran. And Netanyahu hasn't been Netanyahu if he hasn't basically said every single day to the United States, go to war with Iran. And of course, he's saying it again now. So Syria is being eaten alive. And all of this is a part of Netanyahu's effort to expand Israel, to create now a greater Israel that encompasses not only Israel, not only Palestine, but parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, and to listen to some of these nutcases, parts of Egypt as well, because if you look at the texts from 700 BC, well, it seems like part of Egypt is promised to these zealots. So this is really, really, and what does the U.S. administration do? That's all fine. Everything's fine. Whatever Israel does, that'll be temporary. We support this. Not a glimmer of coherence. Anyway, we're counting the days for Biden to leave. But I'm worried with the incoming Trump administration also. There hasn't been a voice yet that says, let's ratchet down the war in the Middle East, because the power of the Israel lobby is both parties, and it's very powerful and it's very dangerous. And
what will happen in your view to all of this real estate? Ambassador Craig Murray told us a little while ago, I mentioned this in the introduction to the show, that Israel has already seized Syrian land that is more than 3 times the size of the Gaza Strip. I mean, would any international order, would the UN, would any other countries beside the US recognize the legitimacy of this? It's
of
just
course not.
theft.
This is, well, it's not only theft, it's completely illegal in international law. The world will obviously oppose this. Israel has not only seized this land, it's by many reports 15 or 20 kilometers outside of Damascus right now. This is a major invasion by Israel. And with these zealots, and they are zealots, they're 7th century BC zealots, by the way, that's what they are. They are saying, yeah, we're going to move in. We even see rabbis going to talk about the new settlements that are going to be in the Syrian territory that's captured. I mean, you just cannot believe the irresponsibility and the lack of an American foreign policy, because the Israel lobby owns American foreign policy, completely contrary to America's interests.
It may very well own the Trump foreign policy with even a greater depth of control than the Biden foreign policy, because of the public statements he's made, Mrs. Adelson, the amount of money she's given, and other folks that he has appointed. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who has some views about the CIA consistent with yours and mine, is an ardent Zionist, as is everybody else in his national security team. I don't know if they're all going to be confirmed by the Senate, but this is the mindset that he has chosen.
I think that it's very important for
Sebastian Gorka sounds like Smotrich and Ben Gavir, well, speaking a little better English.
I think that it's very important for people to differentiate two basic ideas. One is that Israel should have security, something that I believe in and agree with. And the other, this concept of greater Israel based on ancient texts 2,700 years ago that ride roughshod on millions of people in complete violation of every standard of morality, ethics, and law of the world today. So if we're living in 7th century BC and guided by a quite genocidal text, by the way, which these people read, and it says, go kill everyone in this territory because this is your territory. Well, that's the kind of world that we're going to get. Being in favor of Israel's security is one thing, but Israel has its borders on the 4th of June, 1967. Those are Israel's legal borders. The International Court of Justice just said that again, but that goes back 57 years, actually, to the fall of 1967, after the war in that year, when in UN Security Council Resolution 242, it was already said that those occupied lands are not Israel's. But Israel is in the hands of absolute extremists of the most shocking sort who are talking about the physical expansion of Israel, not only to rule over Palestine, that is the Palestine that isn't killed, slaughtered, or ethnically cleansed, but also Lebanon, Syria, and it goes on the maps of some of these crazy people. So this is what we're up against. Now, is it really true that people in the incoming Trump administration are going to champion a map of greater Israel that is a map that has Israel taking territory in Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Iraq onward? Is that really what we're going to do? Because then we're going to drive to the end of the world in nuclear war, because it's so crazy. You can't even imagine that people would say this. So people have to define their terms. It's one thing to support Israel's security. It's another thing to believe that the American military and American foreign policy is dedicated to the delusions of people reading 2,700-year-old texts about slaughtering peoples so that there can be a greater Israel. It's a question of what we mean by all of these terms.
Do you foresee American military involvement in Netanyahu's expansionist plans? Apparently, we are bombing portions of Syria, and we know that there's 1,000 troops on the ground. I would defy anybody to justify this in terms of American national security, and you would as well, I think.
None of what's happened in the last, I'll say, 21 years under Netanyahu's guidance has been for U.S. security. Netanyahu talked the American people into war with Iraq. That was his war. Netanyahu talked the Clinton people into overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi. Netanyahu talked the American government under Clinton into trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad starting in 2011. Netanyahu talked America into wars across this region. Has any of this been about American security? No way. Not at all. America's more insecure, more in danger, more indebted than ever before because of this radical policy. So the one thing I'm hoping President Trump talks about making America great again, at least make America sovereign again. Let's have our own foreign policy, not dictated by another country, not dictated by Ukraine, which could get us into World War III, not dictated by Israel, which could get us into World War III. Let's have our own foreign policy that is based on American security.
I think he believes that, with the exception of Israel, in part because of his long-standing relationship with the donor class. So
yeah, it's
as
true. But you know,
as this is, Jeff, I don't see any relief with respect to Israel. I don't see any relief coming. I just see, unless something happens domestically that removes Netanyahu from the scene, which is not unforeseeable. I don't see American foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel and America continuing to give Israel everything it wants changing under Trump. Do you?
Donald Trump should explain to his donors, thank you for putting me into office. I'm here to serve American well-being and American security. Thank you very much. He is absolutely in the most decisive position, of course, in the whole world to keep us out of nuclear war, to keep us out of a spreading war. I'm sorry, whether it's Miriam Adelson or anyone else, they have no business even remotely trying to run American national security policy. None at all. And I think President Trump knows that. And I think it behooves him to tell his donors, thank you very much for all the support. And now I, as President of the United States, will look after American national security.
Professor Sachs, from your lips to President Trump's ears.
Let's hope.
Assassinated by Ukrainians. And do you think that Ukrainians, by committing this type of behavior, are they seeking for some sort of strategic gain or something? Because right now, the way that they're doing this and the situation with the Ukrainian army, what's your understanding on the main goal, main objective of this type of behavior?
I don't know. I mean, it's first of all, it's criminal behavior. It's not military behavior. Understand that militaries don't assassinate military leaders. So it's criminal behavior by a criminal organization, Ukrainian intelligence, operating for a criminal government, the Zelensky government. That's how they chose to define themselves. And the additional problem to this is that the United States and NATO are associating with these criminal elements and therefore connected to these criminal actions. I would hope that if an American military officer had been appraised of this operation, that he or she would have said not just no, but hell no, not on my watch. It isn't going to happen. We don't do this. Because what is Russia supposed to do? The Russians have behaved in a very controlled manner.
Putin's been too nice with
anybody who thinks that Russia's struggling on the battlefield. You need to understand that Russia has not brought to bear anything near the totality of the military force that it can be brought to bear on this issue. Russia is fully capable of destroying Ukraine in totality without using nuclear weapons. If Russia wanted to, this war would be over in a month. Ukraine would be annihilated. Hundreds of thousands of people would be killed, and Russia would be in total control. Russia can bring to bear firepower that's unimaginable, but it has opted not to do so because this is a special military operation designed to achieve limited, political and military objectives. I mean, these are significant objectives. The demilitarization of Ukraine, denazification of Ukraine, and Ukraine being neutral in perpetuity. These aren't minor objectives. And I think Russia has allowed for the fact that Ukraine will resist, meaning that Russia will tolerate, a certain amount of resistance. It's natural. But what Russia won't tolerate is Ukraine being turned into a proxy conflict with the West, and that's what it is today. And so, Russia has put some red lines out there, and we've seen that they're being crossed on a regular basis. I mean, when I speak to a member of Congress about, what is the assessment of the U.S. intelligence community regarding Russia's threats to use, resort to nuclear weapons if pushed, I had assumed that the CIA, according to the mainstream media, had told the representatives and the Biden administration that Russia was bluffing. That's what's reported in the mainstream media. And this individual, very senior person who had received the briefing, said that's not what they said at all. They said Russia's not bluffing. And the disturbing thing was the response of the Biden administration, which is, that's okay, we're prepared for a nuclear war with Russia over Ukraine. Just let that sink in for a second, Nima. They're prepared for a nuclear war with Russia. And we know by the briefing of, or the response to questions at a Center for Strategic International Studies seminar gathering in November by Thomas Buchanan, the Director of Plans for Strategic Command, that we have a war plan that we're ready to implement. We believe we can win. So when that's your mindset in the U.S. government, what's assassinating a Russian general or two? This general was particularly troublesome for the United States because he had been fully appraised of the documentation regarding the operation of American-funded biological labs in Ukraine, many of which, although sold as defensive biological warfare, contained we're doing work that can only be described as offensive biological war, total violation of the Biological Toxins and Weapons Convention. And this guy was calling out America. Now, I mean, his elimination doesn't, do away with the fact that Russia has this data and there are other qualified people to do this, but this is the personification of this conflict that Ukraine, for whatever reason, believed that it would benefit by taking out a man who was embarrassing the West. Did Ukraine operate on its own volition, or were they encouraged or even direct?
Now imagine that they caught Ukraine stockpiling chemical weapons, biological weapons that just attack certain DNA structures and genetics, like Russians, things of that nature. They caught Ukraine and the U.S. doing that, and now all over the news they saying he used chemical weapons in Ukraine to slander the man.
Directed to do so by the United States and NATO. No, but it doesn't matter. No sovereign state can allow senior general officers or anybody to be assassinated willy-nilly in their capital and go and have that go unresponded to. I put a post out earlier today on X where I liken this to bank robbery. I mean, bank robberies happen. If I wanted to right now, I could get up out of my seat, get in my car, go and rob a bank. Can't stop me from doing that. What you can do is make the punishment for my robbing a bank, so absolutely, horrific that I will sit here and go, well, it's not in my interest to rob a bank. I'm not going to do that. Or if I do it, for other people to say, whoa, man, we ain't robbing banks. And this is what has to happen now. Ukraine has, not for the first time, assassinated people in Moscow. But here we have a senior general killed in Moscow. Left unresponded to, it will happen again. And then at some point in time, out of this act of desperation, Ukraine will attempt to kill the president of Russia or other senior government officials. Ukraine has to be put on notice that, and the West has to be put on notice that this cannot happen. I can tell you right now with absolute certainty that if any nation assassinated a senior general officer of the United States military in Washington, D.C., the United States would make that entity pay the heaviest possible price. The heaviest possible price. Because you can't, the whole concept of deterrence is you don't even consider doing something because the consequences will be so absolutely horrific that it's just not worth it. And we have to make it clear to anybody that you just can't go knocking off, general officers. We had a situation in the United States back when I was just after I'd finished doing my work in the Soviet Union as an inspector, where we had a member of the on-site inspection agency killed outside of the Pentagon by terrorists who fled. Well, we hunted down those terrorists and we brought those terrorists to justice. That was an individual act. It wasn't something state-sponsored. Had it been state-sponsored, had, for instance, Pakistan sent this person to kill an American officer in Washington, D.C., we would have blown Pakistan off the map. That's just the way it is. And Ukraine now needs to be punished in a way that that's just my opinion. I can't speak for the Russian government. They have broader strategic objectives in mind. There are many who say this is what Ukraine wants Russia to do. But this isn't an overreaction. I don't think Donald Trump would sit there and say, nah, because all Putin has to do, what would you do, Donald? What would you do? Okay. What would you do, Donald Trump, if Iran killed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? What would you do? Blew him up outside of his home on his way to work. What would you do? And Trump knows what he would do. And so I think Russia right now literally has a blank check to hold Ukraine accountable and establish deterrence so that this kind of criminal act never again takes place. But again, that's a Russian decision that only Russia gets to make. I'm just coming at it from my perspective.
And here is what Dmitry Medvedev said about this. Everything must be done to destroy those who ordered the murder of General Kirillov, the military and political leadership of Ukraine. He's just talking about that anybody in the government, in the Zelensky administration could be killed, could be assassinated because of this.
Not assassinated. Russia's not talking about assassination. They're talking about retaliation. Assassination is a cowardly act where you go in there and you blow somebody up using a bomb on a scooter. What Russia's talking about is we're taking you off the map with military force. Medvedev, nice words. Yay, do it. Quit talking and do it. Otherwise, you're just talking and all you do is embolden the other side to act again, and another general will die, then another general will die. So shut up and do it. I'm tired of, it's just me personally. I'm just fed up with a situation where, people talk tough and they don't do anything about it. Don't talk tough. It's better if you don't say anything at all. Just continue to press forward on the battlefield and say that's where our victory is going to take place. And we're willing to accept all of this. But if Dmitry Medvedev, former president, former prime minister, current deputy of the National Security Council of Russia, is saying this, and then Russia does nothing, all it does is it embarrasses Russia, it makes a fool out of Russia. So, again, this is just me. Russia gets to do it. It's a sovereign state, but I just think this is a very dangerous situation, a very dangerous situation. And to be honest, the more Russia can do to impress Donald Trump with the reality that Russia is not bluffing, can't be pushed around, and there is a destructive consequence for trying to, get Russia to do that which it's not willing to do. Trump may be operating under the notion that he has some leverage against Russia, that he can threaten to do X, Y, and Z, and Russia will respond. And I think it's imperative that Russia let Trump know that while they're open to, termination of this conflict, it will be done on terms acceptable to Russia. And you're not going to get Russia to do anything it doesn't want to do. And oh, by the way, here's the consequence of not, paying attention. Boom. The Ukrainian government has ceased to have any legitimacy whatsoever. I mean, we're talking about a president who won't have an election, a parliament that won't have an election, and they carry out assassinations openly. I mean, they are a terrorist organization by definition. So let's take out the terrorist organization. Let's eliminate it. But again, that's a Russian decision, not my decision. I'm just somebody sitting back here watching it.
I think General Kirillov was the most important figure by far as we know, that was assassinated by Ukrainians. Is that the case?
I believe so. I mean, there has been similar assassinations of senior Russian leaders, in Crimea and in the Novorossiya area, Donetsk, Lugansk, etc. And again, it's an act of terrorism, but the closer you are to the battlefield, the more you can speak of, well, it's a command and control target. Kirillov wasn't command and control. He wasn't directing combat operations against Ukraine. He was a man who was fronting for a very politically damaging campaign of truth, exposing the lies and the actions of the United States in Ukraine. And I don't think that this was an accident that he was picked out. He was indicted by the Ukrainians one day and assassinated the next. That's the speed of Ukrainian justice, then Russian retribution better be faster, or else this is going to get out of control.
You talk about Donald Trump, Scott, the way that he's trying to picture the conflict in Ukraine. He said in his post on social media and in his latest interview with, if I'm not mistaken, MSNBC, he mentioned that more than 600,000 Russian soldiers were killed and injured. And on the other hand, on the part of Ukrainians, is 400,000. Who's giving this information to him, and why is that so exaggerated on the part of Russians?
Well, I mean, clearly he's getting his advice from his national security team. Now, I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard is involved in this at all, but Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, Keith Kellogg, these are people who buy into the exaggerations of the anti-Russia crowd, and there are gross exaggerations out there. He has to do better. Donald Trump has to do better. But I'll tell you why. Because first of all, and I learned this the hard way when I was dealing with Iraqi government officials as a weapons inspector. We received all sorts of intelligence from around the world about Iraqi capabilities. And about 90% of it was just wrong, dead wrong. But if I sat down with the Iraqis and started spouting out numbers, just throwing them out there that were wrong, they just would look at it and they'd lose all respect for you, because they realize that you're an idiot and you don't know what you're talking about, which means you can be fooled. You can be, they can sit there and blow smoke at you because you'll go chasing just about anything. I made sure that look, there was times, of course, I went out there and said things, and they're like, "Come on, Scott, you can do better. You're better than this. We know you're better than this." But generally speaking, when I sat down with them, I had done my homework. I had ground it down, And when I hit them with facts. And you could just see in their face, they're like, God damn it, he's on to us. And then it's just a long, drawn out battle to get to the truth. And then you get to the truth. But you have to sit down with the facts. And when you hit them with the facts and they know that you know what you're talking about, that you have a solid background in what you're talking about, there's nothing they can do. It's a losing battle for them. And Trump needs to understand, if he's going to sit down opposite Vladimir Putin, he better have the facts, not speculation, not politicized information, the hard ass facts, or don't open your mouth. If you don't have the facts, shut up. Don't say anything. Let the other side commit. And then if they're committing to a lie, then attack. I always found that to be the best approach, is let the other side commit to a story, to a narrative, and then I can take that back and take it apart. And then come back and hit them with things that show it how bad it is. But if I commit to a narrative that's not 100% correct, that's wildly, speculative in nature, they just look at it and say, you don't know what you're talking about. And we're not here to educate you. This is supposed to be a negotiation. And if you're telling me you're coming into a negotiation ignorant as the day is long, then, we're just going to try and use this negotiation to get, to our advantage. And that's not how we get out of this thing. So Trump has to do a better job before opening his mouth. But unfortunately, he's shown himself susceptible to saying the last thing that somebody whispers into his ear. He needs better advisors, especially on Russia. He needs much better advisors than the one he has today.
Do you think that what the Biden administration right now is trying to do, considering the conflict in Ukraine, would benefit Donald Trump? Because with the new aids to Ukraine, and Donald Trump in his last talk, in his last interview with the press, he said that they were not informed him before letting Ukrainians attacking Russia using ATACMS. And if that was the case, does the new administration have any sort of leverage on the Biden administration? Because they're getting, by January 20th, they're going to be in Washington. And they have to manage the situation. There has to be some sort of connection between the two administrations. It seems that wasn't the case so far.
Well, it doesn't have to be. There should be, cooperation and all that, especially in a situation where we have a divergence. Again, going back in history, at the end of the administration of George W. Bush, the START treaty was setting to expire. And there was a need for an extension of the treaty, et cetera. And the Bush administration had a negotiation position that was not compatible with the vision of the incoming Obama administration. And so what the Bush administration did is say, well, we lost the election, and they have something, so we're going to stop and just call pause, and they're going to pick it up when they come in, and they've got it. They've got the ball. We're not going to do anything more. And that's what should be done here. The best, what Biden should have done is said that we're going to stay the course in terms of what we've already committed to prior to the election, but there will be no expansion of aid. There will be no change in the guidance in place, because we have a new administration coming in, and they're going to be in charge on January 12th. But instead, what Biden has sought to do is what they call Trump-proofing this policy. And that means to create a situation that's so catastrophically, complicated that Trump can't change course. And one of the things that, as I said earlier, the Biden administration appears to be willing to take this up to a limited nuclear war. No, there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. And of course, it'll lead to a general exchange of nuclear weapons and we'll all die. But the idiots in the White House right now think that they can fight a limited nuclear exchange with Russia and prevail. And that this would, trap the Trump administration. I wish they would listen to the words of, Thomas Buchanan, who in that same presentation to the Center for Strategic International Studies said that, while the United States would seek to prevail, what that meant in reality hasn't been explained to the American people. And that if the American people understood what winning a nuclear war means, it would mean that all life as we know it stops. If you live, you will live in a world that is completely different than the world that exists today. That a nuclear war doesn't continue the American way of life, it ends the American way of life. And yet the American people are ignorant. He said maybe it's time for the government to be more honest with the American people about what they're getting ready to do. It doesn't matter because, again, they think they're going to win a nuclear war. They're not, and we'll all die, so it won't matter. But my point is the Biden administration is not making any effort to allow for a smooth transition. And so, it means that Trump is going to inherit a situation that's already complicated and it's going to be much worse. Now, Trump can simplify this because what the Biden administration is trying to do is tie Trump, to NATO and Ukraine. And the quickest way to stop that is not to play that game and just say on day one, I'm delinking from Ukraine altogether. We're not going to support you ever again. You're done. You're finished. No ifs, ands, or buts. And NATO, don't mess with us here because I'll just pull out. I'll terminate my relationship with you in a heartbeat. Shut up, sit down, don't say anything while we do this. I don't want to hear from you. That's what he should do. That way, all of this Trump proofing is irrelevant because Trump proofing implies that Trump's going to come in and be trapped by the policies and the precedents. And Trump can just simply unplug from that. But to do that, Trump would have to be willing to accept a decisive Russian victory in Ukraine, a victory that's defined by Russian terms. And right now, Trump doesn't seem to be willing or able to embrace that, at least not by the things that he said. But he has done some important things. The immediate trigger for nuclear war is the use of ATACMS missiles. And Trump has said some very important things. He said it in his Time magazine interview, and he said it in his most recent press conference that he doesn't support this. It's bad policy. It'll probably change under his administration. So that's at least a positive.
Yeah, in this press conference, he said that he's not interested in the conflict in Ukraine. He wants to put an end to the conflict as soon as possible. Here comes the question. With the administration that he has chosen so far, are they going to follow his policy, or they're going to do the same thing that they've done towards Syria and the policy in Syria in his first term? Do you see any sort of potential for going in that direction?
In what direction?
In the direction that we've seen during his first term, in terms of he wanted to withdraw the troops from Syria, and his administration wasn't following his policies.
I think the situation right now, post fall of Assad, actually begged for the withdrawal of American troops. That this is a problem that America doesn't want to be involved in. This is a problem between Turkey, Iran, Iraq. I think Russia is disengaging. But this American troops, if he wants to avoid a war, then he needs to get out of a region that just basically unloaded a whole bunch of gunpowder and everybody's playing with matches. There's nothing to be gained here. The American troops in Syria were there to facilitate the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad's regime. That now has happened. Whether they played a role in it or not doesn't matter. That mission is gone. They can call it the counter-ISIS mission, but that's stupid. ISIS just won. We got head choppers in Damascus. Al-Qaeda, reformed Al-Qaeda. Jolani went and served under al-Baghdadi in ISIS. So come on, this is stupidity in the extreme. Donald Trump, if you want to be a man of your word and say that, ISIS would defeat, then you have to start bombing Damascus. Keep American troops, reinforce them. Now you have to overthrow Al-Qaeda in Damascus if you're a man of your word. But he's not. He doesn't understand anything that he talks about in the region. And to be honest, it's other people's responsibility to get rid of Al-Qaeda. It's tragic what's happening in Syria today, but this is not a problem for America to solve. This is a problem for Turkey to resolve. Israel, emboldened as it is, the United States needs to just get out of the region and let the region, deal with this issue. All we do is complicate things, and unless we're going to go in again. I mean, I'm not in favor of it, but one could articulate that this is a strategic defeat for the United States. Al Qaeda raising the black flag of Islam over Damascus, and that it's imperative for the United States to come in and annihilate this. And maybe we could make common cause with Israel, since that's what everybody wants to do, apparently. So we can have that famous Israeli-American war against the regime, and then come in and cleanse Syria of this problematic element, and create a secular system. Wait a minute, we had that with Bashar al-Assad, but that's okay. We wanted to get rid of him. But what do we? Who knows? Now he's talking big about Iran. I don't think he knows what he wants. I don't think he understands the region. In the correlation between application of military power and effective diplomacy. If his focus is Iran and getting what he had called a better deal with the Iranians about their nuclear program, then getting American troops out of Syria and Iraq is a good thing. That would be something that needs to be done, and should be done as a measure of good faith. Because if there is going to be a conflict with Iran, those troops don't add anything. They become problematic, because now they just become targets for Iran. There's not enough of them. They're not of the right quality and quantity to intervene militarily. Any conflict with Iran will be strategic based, possibly and probably using nuclear weapons. So you need to get those troops out. But I think as a good faith measure, leave, and then tell Iran, look, we are willing to cede, not cede in terms of surrender, but we recognize that you have legitimate spheres of influence and interest. And we're willing to let you sort that out with your neighbors peacefully. But you can't do that with a nuclear weapons capability. And right now, frankly speaking, listening to the rhetoric of your senior leadership, you're about a week and a half away from having a nuclear bomb. And that's just not going to happen. So we can do this the easy way, which is, let's go back to the JCPOA and take it further. No sunset clause, permanent limits on your ability to enrich, But in exchange, lifting of sanctions and all this kind of stuff. And that's the deal Trump wants to make. He desperately wants to make that. Or in lieu of that, we bomb the totality of your nuclear infrastructure together with Israel. But understand that when we do so, A, we're going to use nuclear weapons, and B, it's going to be regime change. That when we come in, we're going to remove the regime from power. You will not survive this. It will be all over for you. I think that's the direction he's heading right now with Iran. But American troops, they play, especially the troops in Syria and Iraq, this anti-ISIS mission. Stop calling it that, because it's absurd to say you're on an anti-ISIS mission when ISIS is in control of Damascus. But we'll see. Again, Trump has the potential of, securing two really big diplomatic victories, that either one of which could earn him the Nobel Peace Prize. One of them is bringing into the conflict in Ukraine, and the other one is solving the Iranian nuclear issue. And if he does that, that'll be something that nobody else in the Western world was capable of doing. And he could do this, but he has to stop listening to stupid people. He needs better advisors on both Russia and Iran in order to pull this thing off. And he has to be careful about playing that muscle card too much. Russia, it's just not going to work. And with Iran, they're a very proud nation. And right now there's a significant political infighting going on inside Iran between the president and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And what he needs to do is, if he wants this new deal, he needs to do everything to strengthen the hand of the president of Iran. And you don't do that by, blustering death and destruction. You do that by being genuine about what you're trying to offer. And I think getting those troops out and then talking about the lifting of sanctions and the formal termination of any policy of regime change, meaning that the United States, whatever covert policies we've had, we don't have those anymore. In fact, we will stop all assistance to anti-regime forces. This sort of thing could all be things put on the table that could get induced Iran to give up this nuclear program. Because I think increasingly in Iran, they're seeing this as something that could cause the end of Iran. This nuclear program is not giving them what they wanted. Are they, especially the way it is right now, because the United States, nobody's going to accept Iran on the cusp of being a nuclear weapons state. You either have to reverse that, or Iran has to take the step and become a nuclear weapons state and then say, now what do you do? And I think the answer, what happens is the United States will nuke you hard. I mean, it's what the United States, Donald Trump already built the employment plan when he was president last time. He built the nuclear employment plan in the United States was, in large part influenced by what a nuclear strike would be against Iran. So we already have a war plan against Iran that we're ready to implement. And so if I were the Iranians, I would opt for survival, and I would opt for finding an equitable way out of this, that not to put your entire national existence, not to predicate that on the continued existence of this nuclear program. This program got them to where they are now, which is not a bad place, but it served its function. Iran doesn't need these centrifuges anymore to define who they are and what they are as a nation. Iran needs to pivot, to economic, the economic salvation of their country, and that's not going to come in the form of a uranium centrifuge.
I don't see any sort of disagreement, considering both Iranian and Russian government, to talk with Washington. But do you see any sort of willingness on the part of Washington to talk with them? Let's talk about, I think the easiest conflict would be in Ukraine to talk about. Do you think that these people who are going to work with Donald Trump would facilitate his path toward any sort of agreement between the United States and Russia?
Well, if he relies upon the establishment, the answer is not just no, but hell no. If he relies upon the people that he's put in around him, the answer is probably no. But I think that he's going to rely upon himself. I think I can pretty much guarantee the following: the only person meeting with Vladimir Putin is Donald Trump. There ain't nobody else meeting with Vladimir Putin. He's not going to share that stage with anybody. And he believes that that's a meeting that has to take place to bring this thing to an end. And look, Donald Trump met with Kim Jong-un, something that everybody said was unprecedented, I think Donald Trump would meet with the Iranian president. And I don't know if the supreme leader would meet with him. But I do believe that a meeting with the Iranian president is a real possibility to bring in it. So Donald Trump's not going to, with things of this scale, he's not going to trust it to Marco Rubio and others. He's going to do it himself. And that's the strength of having a Donald Trump presidency, because the establishment would never allow any of this to happen. The establishment exists to promote war, not peaceful outcomes. And Donald Trump is the anti-establishment guy. So the potential's there. Whether he can pull it off is another question, but the potential is definitely there. This Donald Trump-centric diplomacy is the best chance we have for peace in Ukraine and Iran. But he can also blow it, because he has, when you have a keystone or your cornerstone mantra of peace through strength. Well, what's the strength mean? Are you coming in threatening Vladimir Putin? And the Iranians aren't going to respond to threats. What Iran will respond to is the potential of maintaining their national interests and getting on the path of economic salvation. I mean, that's what the regime needs more than anything. If you can improve the economy of the average Iranian, you strengthen. I think what you'll find is in the next elections, you'll get greater participation as people start to say, okay, this is a government that is responsive to our needs, is doing what we need, et cetera. And so we're going to participate in forming this government. And Trump knows this, but I just think his instincts sometimes, he's a very insecure man, and he needs therefore to posture from a position of strength that doesn't come naturally to him, especially with Putin. He's going to have to manage that one very carefully. But the good news for him is that the Russians understand more about Donald Trump than Donald Trump does, I think, and they will do their best to make sure that any meeting between the two presidents has the potential of going well. Whereas the Iranians, I think, will be very guarded, and a lot of that meeting will depend upon what Trump is able to bring to the table and articulate. I don't think the Iranians are going to be leaning too forward there because there's political constraints. You can't be accused of caving into the devil. And right now, America is still very much the devil in Iran for just cause. And so Trump's going to have to be a little bit more proactive and a little bit more charismatic, I think, to pull that one off. But I think the Russians will do their best to help Trump succeed. And with Iran, it's going to really require Donald Trump to overcome the tendency to threaten Iran when you get Iranian reticence against any initiatives. It's going to be a longer courtship with Iran, one that's going to require some maturity and some patience. But I do think that if it's done right, with the United States legitimately and realistically respecting Iran's national interests, I think we could walk away from that. I think there's a path to walk away. Now, I know that every one of the Iranians who claim to be my supporter are now condemning me to death. How dare you? But this is about what's the alternative? Nuclear war? And while there are some who might believe in martyrdom, I don't. I don't believe in martyrdom. I believe that our duty and responsibility in this life is to live this life to the fullest. And you can only do that if you're alive. And so the things we can do without surrendering, I do believe that there are things worth dying for, and that there are causes worth dying for. But those causes, if they don't need to manifest themselves violently, then you don't need to die. And so I'm a big fan of diplomacy. And I just don't think Iran, this great state of Iran, this great nation with its great history, needs to define itself by a centrifuge. That's just not. It's not what Iran needs. That's not the hill Iran needs to die on. Now, that centrifuge represented Iran's only, as it has for the last couple decades, it defined Iran's existential existence in the face of Israel and in the United States. Then they made. I think the Iranian program should. I don't know how the Iranians define things, but even if it's dissolved, it should be called a hero program. I mean, everybody involved should be given medals and awards because they have positioned Iran to be where they're at right now. But we're now at that point where I think Iran took it too far. I think Iran took that nuclear weapons capability right up to the cusp, and it's a self-admitted, capability. It's too far. Barack Obama built the JCPOA to have a 1-year breakout window. And we're talking about a breakout window measured in days right now. It's just not a calculation that Donald Trump's going to sit with. It's not going to survive the Trump presidency. One way or another, that breakout is going to be eliminated. You could do it diplomatically, or it can be done militarily.
The problem is that Donald Trump is responsible in both cases, in Russia and in Iran, withdrawing from INF Treaty, and with Iran withdrawing from JCPOA. These two treaties, these two agreements were so important in terms of the relationship or any sort of ties between Iran and the United States, Russia and the United States. And we know that in those days, Netanyahu and his administration were totally against JCPOA. And right now, with these guys, with this new administration, it is totally pro-Israel, pro-Netanyahu, I would say. And are they going to let any sort of agreement being signed between the United States and Iran, or they're going to make the same allegations, just not letting Donald Trump to do his policy, to implement his policies?
Well, first of all, Donald Trump didn't negotiate the JCPOA, and therefore he's not attached to it in any way, shape, or form. That's why he could withdraw from it. And his whole premise was, I'm going to get you a better deal. Second of all, the same thing holds with the INF Treaty. He didn't negotiate it, and he was briefed wrongly that Russia was in violation, and he was also briefed that the United States wasn't able to match China's intermediate capabilities because China wasn't bound by this treaty, so therefore the treaty was a bad treaty. And so he withdrew, arguing that there's a better deal out there. So from Donald Trump's perspective, he's not a deal breaker, he's a deal maker. That he took, in his opinion, were two bad deals, one a bad treaty, the other one a bad agreement, and got rid of them. And he said, I'm ready to have better agreements, better treaties. Could be naive, but that's his approach. So I don't think he's married to the past. I don't think the Israelis have the hold that they think they might have over Donald Trump. Donald Trump has positioned himself to be surrounded by some very pro-Israeli people, and his rhetoric has been very pro-Israel. And he will promote, Israeli interests to a point, but I don't think Donald Trump surrenders American interests to Israel. And I think it would be a very, very bad mistake for the Netanyahu government to conspire behind the back of Donald Trump or try to, upset anything that he personally was involved in. I think if Donald Trump became personally involved in resolving this Iran thing, that he would put Netanyahu, or whoever the prime minister is, on notice that we'll talk to you, we'll let you air your things privately, but you don't get to have a vote on this one. This is an American thing. We're doing it, and I think the Israelis would be wise to agree to that, because look, they're finally in the position that they want to be in, Israel, because of the collapse of Assad. They are in the position of solidifying greater Israel. And they have a president who's come in who appears to be willing to let them do this. But one of the things that that they're worried about is Iran's nuclear program. And so they need to let, Trump resolve that nuclear program. And that's what Trump is seeking to do. He's seeking to eliminate that nuclear program one way or another, but the best way is through diplomacy. So the Israelis, I do think on this one, they're not going to try and sabotage, because strategically they're getting exactly what they want. Iran's position in the region vis-a-vis the axis of resistance has been significantly damaged by the fall of Assad. Now Hezbollah in Lebanon is isolated, and I think that the Hezbollah as a threat to Israel is going to be managed both politically and militarily through domestic political imperatives within Lebanon. This weakens Iran, because the key thing about Iran was, if Israel wanted to have a fight with Iran always had that loaded weapon of Hezbollah up against the Israeli head. They could say, yeah, but boom, we're going to shoot you. That loaded pistol's been disarmed. It's in the process of being disarmed. And without that, Iran has lost all advantages. And because now, Iran will have to fire missiles that lead, that could lead to a nuclear retaliation, and then involvement of the United States. This is not the direction Iran wanted to go. Iran always wanted to be more coercive with Israel, pressure, and then do the axis of resistance to, contain, the Sunni shield that Israel was seeking to build through the Abrams Accords. But that, it looks like, that's that's the loss of Syria is well, not fatal to the axis of resistance. It does serious harm to it right now, and it puts Israel in the driver's seat. And I think Israel's happy to be in that position. And I think at this point in time, they would be satisfied with denuclearizing Iran as opposed to regime change.
We had the participation of the Russian government in JCPOA between Iran and the United States. They were on the sideline, but they were trying to facilitate this situation with the agreement. Right now, with the situation that we're witnessing between the United States and Russia, do you think that Russians would be part of this, or it's going to be just about the United States and Iran?
I mean, ultimately, it's going to be about the United States and Iran. The deal has to satisfy the United States. Trump is not Obama, and Trump isn't going to yield the floor to, international interference in his strategic vision. But Iran is, they have a strategic relationship with Russia, but I think Trump's going to play to that. Because the key aspect of the strategic relation is this, north-south economic corridor coming down from St. Petersburg, down into Chabahar, I guess, or Bandar Abbas. For that to thrive, you need sanctions lifted on both countries, and and that's what Trump will be offering through his Ukraine deal and through this deal. So I think Russia will be involved. But it will be done again peripherally. I think the core issue of, resolving the Iranian nuclear threat will be left to definitions put forward by the United States, influenced by Israel, not by anybody other players. But I do think that ultimately what's put in place will be a version of the JCPOA with extensive inspections by the IAEA using additional protocols, etc. And that'll be part of the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, functions. It's not going to be American inspectors coming in; it's going to be IAEA inspectors coming in. And but who knows? Trump may insist on an American inspection presence in the IAEA, something that previously wasn't permitted. But I don't think Iran is in the strongest of positions right now, and I do think that if you press Iran intelligently, you can because look, if I were Trump and I was talking to the Iranian president, I would say, look, you got to understand, we're overcoming decades of mistrust in the United States. I know you have the same problem with us. I get it. But I'm trying to tell you that the only way a treaty works here, because we're going to be talking about a treaty, not an agreement. I got to take it to the Senate and get ratification. In order for me to get ratification, they have to trust the IAEA. Right now, they don't. They just don't trust them. That means that we're going to have an American presence there. Now, we will agree that the Americans on the IAEA operate in accordance with whatever the bounds are here, but we have to have American eyes on target. That's just a requirement. And I'm sorry, but that's a deal breaker for me. And if he does it right, the Iranian president might be able to. There's ways to get that done. For instance, Trump could organize confidence building visits by American specialists to introduce the American specialists to the Iranians, who then take them to the various places that will be inspected, showing them this place. And now Americans are physically present there. They see the names, and now those guys come back as IAEA inspectors. There's things that can be done to facilitate confidence building in this that doesn't make this a harsh imposition of a term. But I think there's going to have to be in order for this to become a treaty that the United States Senate can ratify, there are going to have to be some American aspects to the monitoring and verification of this agreement, because neither the United States nor Israel is going to accept an IAEA only monitoring regime as But that was all that Obama could get in 2015 because we didn't have the as strong of a hand as we have right now. We actually have a very strong hand with the collapse of Syria and such. If we play it right, and not try to go for the kill, if we just play this right and smart, I think we can get to where we need to be, and that's in the best interests of both the United States and Iran.
This is the problem. I don't think that Iran would agree on that. to have.
I think they would actually. I think they would because they have no other choice. You can say no, but they would. I'll tell you, Nima. You can say no. I'll tell you what. When UN inspectors got kicked out in 1998, the Iraqis said no UN inspectors and definitely no American inspectors. I went back to Iraq. See, I happen to know a little bit what I'm talking about when it comes to diplomacy, and I had discussions at the highest levels. The Vice President of Iraq, Taha Yassin Ramadan, with Tariq Aziz, with the foreign minister, with all the nuclear people, all the weapons people. And I said, you have to let UN inspectors back in, and there has to be an American presence. And they agreed because that had to be done. I'm telling you right now, if it's handled right, the Iranians will be told, you have no choice. There is no choice in the matter. So let's do this diplomatically. Let's make sure it's something that doesn't threaten you. But the idea that the Iranians are going to go, no, then their cities disappear. That's where we're at right now. This isn't Barack Obama. This is Donald Trump. He has a nuclear war plan ready. This is what I told the Iraqis. This is George W. Bush, not Bill Clinton. He wants to invade your country and wipe you off and kill all of you. I told Taha Yassin Ramadan, the vice president, who had a pistol on his hip that was well worn because he shoots people with it. And in a one-on-one meeting, I looked him in the eyes when he told me no, and I said, then I'm looking at a dead man. This is an American telling an Iraqi vice president that I'm looking at a dead man if he doesn't do this. I thought he was going to shoot me on the spot. But he paused. He asked the interpreter to make sure that what I said was right. They said, okay, tell me again why I have to do this. And then we went through it and we talked through it. If this is done right, it's not a deal breaker at all. Not a deal breaker at all. America's a reality that Iran has to live with. And if you want to have good economic relations, if you want the lifting of sanctions, this death to America crap has to stop. Okay? It has to stop. I know it's emotional. They're not really trying to kill America, but it has to stop. You have to say, no more death to America. If you want to do business with me, I'm not sending my businessmen over to your country if there's death to America. Cease and desist. What we need to start talking about is how do we peacefully coexist with one another. I don't expect you to say love America. There's a long way to go before we fall in love. But death to America, no, that's done. And that means that American inspectors will be on the ground in Iraqi nuclear facilities because there's no other way for this to become a treaty. And if it doesn't become a treaty, I'm looking at a dead man. That's what you tell the Iranian president. You're dead. Not because I want you dead, but that's just the inevitable outcome of the conflict that's about to happen. I'm trying to stop the conflict. So work with me. This is where we're at right now, Nima. It's not a joke anymore. That's it. Did you see Trump? They said, would you preemptively attack and all? He's not answering that quick because he knows what he's going to do. He knows what's going to happen. He's made the decision. So, it is what it is, man.
Yeah. But after all, I don't see the Iranian government accepting that. This is the
Why? Why do you say that?
Because they don't want Americans on their soil.
They have no choice.
Yeah.
They have no choice. And they know this. Don't you see their president? What he's saying? He's upset about True Promise 2. He didn't want to do it. They were working with the European Union to get sanctions lifted. And then they hit Israel, and that's it. He's pissed. He's pissed. He knows what needs to be done, and so does the supreme leader. Because if the supreme leader didn't know what needed to be done, that president wouldn't be allowed to talk the way he talks. The supreme leader knows what needs to be done. And so, yeah, no. If you start off with the premise that this can't be an agreement, it has to be a treaty. And first of all, from the Iranian perspective, they want a treaty because they don't want an agreement to just be wiped off. So you start off that. You want a treaty? do you really want a treaty? How bad do you want a treaty? Because the only way you get a treaty is that it's ratified by the United States Senate. And the only way it's going to get ratified by the United States Senate if there's an American presence on the ground with the IAEA inspectors. And that's just a reality Iran will have to deal with. They're really not.
IAEA, that
Pardon?
would work with Iran. IAEA, with IAEA and the people from IAEA, they can do this. But
Americans are part of the IAEA.
Yeah, the Americans can be part of that.
Can be, will be.
But not, they cannot do it separately. Just
no, I didn't say separately. What I said is Americans will be present with the IAEA inspection teams.
That would work, yeah.
Yes, but I do think that the way you get it in is you have American tours of these facilities prior to it. At invitation only, they're not inspectors, but you bring Americans in to do the confidence building work, to say, hi, I'm Scott Ritter. I'm a nuclear guy. Yeah, I'm going to probably be one of the inspectors that comes in. How you doing? Yeah, what do you got here? Let's talk about it. What are you worried about? What are your parameters? Do the confidence building measures. Again, not imposed, just a nice, but then they come back the next time they come, they got their IAEA passports, and the Iranians go, oh, Mr. Ritter, I met you already. How you doing? I'm doing good, thanks. How's your family? Great. Yeah, I remember when you took me out to dinner in Isfahan, beautiful place. Boom, let's get on. And now you talk about doing the work, but there has to be American eyes on target, or else the United States Senate's just not going to go for it. That's a reality that Iran's going to have to learn to live with. I'm not talking about an American inspection process. I'm talking about when Iraq tried to impose no Americans on their inspection team, we couldn't allow that. Americans had to be there. Now, by delinking American policy, by delinking the nuclear program from meaning sanctions are lifted, there's no regime change, then there's not so much room for nefarious activity. If you keep sanctions, you keep regime change, and now you're trying to bring Americans in on an inspection team, now that's a recipe for disaster. Because we did that in Iraq, and the CIA takes over and they go for regime change all the time. But if you make it so that it's purely a technical job of verification of a treaty, and the treaty is, write it out so it's very specific about what the requirements are, and all you're doing is doing that which is permitted by the treaty. I think this is doable, and in the process, there's no nuclear war, and you begin a process of regional stability, because Syria is going to be Iran doesn't need to be at war with America, in the aftermath of Syria. I think there's a window of opportunity here if Donald Trump does it the right way and gets the right people in to talk to him.
Do you think that, Scott, getting to the conflict in Syria, in your opinion, when you look at the people who are so happy with the situation in Syria, what is their understanding in your opinion? Because it seems that the fall of Assad regime is in their minds some sort of, they can facilitate the process of defeating Israel, which is, in my opinion, it's totally the opposite, because Assad was helping the axis of resistance, and he was part of the axis of resistance. And right now, Assad is gone. Everybody's trying to smear Assad and saying something about him. But we have to be honest about Assad and his role in the axis of resistance. How is, do you want to take care of that?
I think it's somebody walking a dog, so I can't really take care of it. I can't go out and shoot a neighbor with the dog. So, we just have to tolerate the fact that a dog walked by my house. Sorry.
Do you understand, Scott, what's happening in the mind of these people who are happy with the situation in Syria? Because, as you mentioned, these people right now in charge, these were part of ISIS, and how we can see any sort of change coming from these people?
Well, I just spent the weekend. I was invited down to Tampa, Florida, by a group of people who are, I would say, they are very much anti-Assad crowd. And one of the reasons why they brought me down is they were concerned. I mean, I've gone down there before. I met with them before. We talked primarily in the context of Palestine and trying to support the concept of a free Palestine and oppose the Israeli genocide, and we got along great on that one. But now we bring in the fall of Assad, and I have taken a very hardline position on this, that this is bad for Palestine. This is fatal for Palestine. But they took umbrage at the tone and tenor and even content of much of what I was saying about this. But because we're not unfriendly, I was invited down, and I had some very pleasant and informative meetings with them. And they did their best to educate me on where they're coming from. And they did. I know exactly where they're coming from. They view Bashar al-Assad's regime as a continuation of a nightmare for Syria that began with his father, Hafez al-Assad. Many of these people, define the Assad tyranny through the Hama massacre of 1982. Depending on numbers, up to 40,000 people could have been killed, 20 to 40,000, hundreds of thousands displaced. And it led to ongoing oppression by the Assad regime, and that's both Hafez and his son Bashar, against anybody who was affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was supposed to be eradicated, but there's always cells, and so in trying to hunt down the cells, people were arrested without due process, imprisoned in a system not known for its appreciation of human rights. Torture, murder took place, and so these people view Bashar al-Assad as a continuation of the father and as an evil man. They use that term over and over again. This was an evil regime. And I'm not here to dispute their interpretation of that. I would imagine that if I were a Syrian citizen and my family members were being rounded up and imprisoned and tortured and murdered, that I would view Bashar al-Assad as an evil man. I didn't ask the question, though, because I didn't want to be rude, but why were your relatives arrested? Were they truly innocent? Or was somebody in your family maybe doing something with the Muslim Brotherhood? Now, that doesn't justify being arrested and tortured, but it changes the concept of arbitrariness. There's no doubt that the Ba'athist regime that governed Syria was in violent opposition to forces that didn't want the Ba'athist regime to be in there. There's also no doubt that the security forces of the Ba'athist regime tended to be recruited amongst the Alawite population, a minority Shia-based sect that Bashar al-Assad comes from. And that if you were Sunni Muslim, and especially a Sunni Muslim that has roots with the Muslim Brotherhood, that you could find yourself on the receiving end. But so what we're dealing here now isn't about arbitrary evilness. We're talking about an existential struggle between secularism, which, as they said, isn't true secularism. It's not about everybody's equal. It's about the Alawites dominating everybody else. That's their interpretation. I would say that maybe Christians might have a different interpretation. The ancient Christian community of Syria might have felt that they were very much at home with the secular government of Bashar al-Assad. And I would imagine that those Sunni elements that had no connectivity with the Muslim Brotherhood probably did all right too. But again, you can't argue against somebody's personal history. And there's no doubt in my mind that there are many people, including the people that I met, who sincerely believe that Bashar al-Assad is evil. But it doesn't change where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is that if you're going to say you support Palestine and say you support the creation of a Palestinian state, understand that as things speak, the current Palestinian leadership, defined by the Palestinian Authority and backed up by Fatah, a Palestinian political party, has totally sold out to Israel and the United States, 100%. Abu Mazen, Mohammed Abbas, is just an Israeli stooge, and Fatah has become an Israeli-controlled political party that is not. With them in charge, what we saw was the Abrams Accords, which led to the isolation of Palestine, trapped to a map, which allowed Israel to continue the parceling up and taking over the West Bank community, and the Palestinians would just be acquiescent to this because they already sold out. So there's not going to be a Palestinian state with Fatah and Abu Mazen. Not going to happen. Just the opposite: the eradication of Palestine as a independent state concept. Hamas, which by the way is affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, began a conflict on October 7, 2023, that created for the first time ever the possibility of at least a pathway to the creation of a Palestinian state, whether it be a two-state solution or a one-state solution, depends on how far it was able to progress. But the world started to recognize the need and desirability of a Palestinian state. You saw nations start to speak out, and you started to see Israel held to account for its genocidal behavior, the isolation of Israel on the global stage, the promotion of a Palestinian state. All of that is taking place because of what Hamas did on October 7th. And that can only be facilitated by the support provided by the axis of resistance. The war of escalated violence, the war of attrition waged between Hezbollah and Israel, Iran's ability to intervene decisively if necessary, and Syria's role in facilitating the land bridge so that Hezbollah could be resupplied by Iran and continue to exist as this loaded pistol against Israel's head. That was it. That was the only pathway to Palestinian state. So if you're someone who says, I believe in a Palestinian state now, and you're somebody out there saying that, the sacrifice of so many innocent Palestinians in Gaza, in order to have any meaning, has to lead to the creation of a Palestinian state. If that's what you're saying, and there's everybody out there saying that, including many of the people that I met with in Tampa, so yeah, we're with that. You can't cheer the fall of Bashar al-Assad because the two can't exist on the same page. It's impossible. You can't say, yes, I'm glad Assad is gone, but I support a free Palestine that's linked to the actions of Hamas on October 7th. Because when Syria gone, the land bridge is blocked, Hezbollah now is isolated, Hezbollah is probably on a path of becoming irrelevant. You're going to see pressure put on its military now that it can't be resupplied, to turn itself over to fall under the control of the Lebanese armed forces. And Hezbollah, now delinked from its resistance function, becomes a political party that eventually, because of politics, will become diminished. You already have a Shia counterpart, the Amal party in Lebanon, and Amal is diminished because of Hezbollah's resistance factor. But if you eliminate the resistance factor, now Amal and Hezbollah have to fight amongst the same population. You're going to see the politics of divide and conquer carried out by the Maronite Christians and the Sunnis that will continue to try to split Hezbollah from Amal, diminish the political influence of the Lebanese Shia. That's the direction Lebanon's heading in right now because of the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Now, people will say, oh, no. The IRGC says they have alternative lines of communication, or, no, they don't. I mean, they might have the ability to smuggle in this, that, and the other thing, but they don't have the ability to load up missiles on a truck and truck them across Syria and deposit them in Lebanon. That just doesn't exist. What about the maritime? I don't think the Iranians control the Mediterranean Sea. I think Israel and the United States control the Mediterranean Sea, and I think without access to Syrian ports, it's just absurd to talk about maritime resupply, and air isn't going to happen either. Israel will shoot down anything that tries to. And so the isolation of Hezbollah is real right now, and left unreversed, the situation in Syria is such that Iran no longer has connectivity with Hezbollah, meaningful connectivity. Iran itself has gone through an interesting transition. When this conflict began, Iran was led by President Raisi, who was I think, of one mind with the IRGC about the role played by the Axis of Resistance in supporting Hamas. But when Raisi died and he's replaced by the current Iranian president doesn't seem to be of that mind. As we already said, he was against the missile retaliation, Operation True Promise 2, the bombardment of Israel by IRGC missiles, against it because it interfered with his vision of improving relations with the West. And he's somebody that's not inclined to sacrifice Iran on this altar. And we saw when the Syrian army started to collapse inside, between November 27th and December 8th, the Iranians were ready to intervene. They had flown in some generals. They were ready to send in more personnel, and they had mobilized tens of thousands of Iraqi proxies. The dog's coming back right away. Sorry. When I get $1 million and I can build my basement studio, we won't have this issue. But until then, we get to listen to the wonderful sounds of dogs barking at dogs, because that's life. Small suburb of Albany. But the point is, the Iranians basically said, we can't fight for that which the Syrians won't fight for. Meaning, if we're going to come in and help, the Syrian army has to be willing to stand up and fight, and they're not. They're running. So this can't become an all Iranian battle. And even the Russians are sitting there with their Air Force saying, well, we're bombing things, but unless it's in support of some meaningful action on the ground, we're not going to do this either. So Iran pulled out. They had no choice because it's not. The Iranian presence in Syria was always about keeping Bashar al-Assad in place so that they could have this landline. But if Bashar al-Assad has collapsed, now it becomes what, a fight between Iran and Turkey? That's just not a fight anybody was ready to have over this issue. And so, Iran is diminished right now too. It's had to pull back and re-examine its role. The axis of resistance now has lost its connectivity. So, this is a big problem for Iran as well. All of this adds up to a fatal blow to the cause of Palestine. And here's where I get frustrated with the anti-Assad people who claim that they're pro-Palestinian. Because when I would present this to them, they didn't debate it. They went, yeah, no, this is bad. We got it. But the Palestinian cause is forever. That's the first they would say. The Palestinian cause is forever. The Palestinian cause is not harmed by this whatsoever. I said, but this ongoing battle with Hamas, yes, but that's not the Palestinian cause. Now you see they've redefined. That was a Hamas initiative, and now they're coming at it going, he didn't coordinate that with Sinwar, didn't coordinate that with anybody. He's sort of on his own on this one. You see, he started this fight, and they're right. He started and coordinate. He brought in Hezbollah and all that, but they weren't saying that when it looked like it might succeed. But now that it's failed, they're saying, no. Sinwar brought that on his own, and now you can't blame Hamas because Khalid Mashad has come out and said, he's supportive of the Syrian people and all that. But that's like saying I support dying, because now the Palestinian cause is finished. But Khalid Mashad isn't on the ground in Gaza. What gave Sinwar gravitas is that he not only was in Gaza in the tunnels, he was above the tunnels with a weapon fighting the Israelis. Last 14 days of his life were spent closing with and destroying the Israeli enemy through firepower maneuver before they killed him. But he died in combat, a hero. Khalid Mashad doesn't have that. He's in exile and he's making brave statements without having to pay the price. When Sinwar died, he was a thin, gaunt, muscled man. Khalid Mashad's a fat man sitting in Qatar, eating fancy food in a restaurant, singing the praises of the forces that brought down Bashar al-Assad while sacrificing the interests of the Palestinian people that he's supposed to represent. And what they said is that this will take some time. And I said, well, how much? A generation, 2? Yeah. So the people cheering this are willing to sacrifice the potential of a Palestinian state today on the concept that somehow, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 60 years, I kept telling the Palestinians have been doing this for 70 years, and they can do it for another 70. Well, didn't all those tens of thousands of people that died in vain? In Rajab's sacrifice was for nothing. That's what you're telling. And that's where I get pissed. That's where I get angry. Because now that makes no sense to me, and I can't support that. I can't support that. I'm not going to say, what I mean by that, I can't support it. I can't be more Palestinian than the Palestinians. You know, I put a lot of who I am and what I am in the concepts of supporting the Palestinian aspirations for a state in conflict with Israel, which was a government which seeking to say there will never be a Palestinian state. So I said, no, there has to be a Palestinian state, and I bought into it. But I can't be more Palestinian than the Palestinians. And if the Palestinians are willing to say, or we're willing to wait for 60, 70 years, then I'm done. I ain't going to be here in 60, 70 years. That's a problem for the next generation. And now that you've made that decision, there's no reason for another Palestinian to die in Gaza, which means get a ceasefire, bring this thing to an end, and surrender. Surrender, because that's what you're saying. You don't want that fight's not going to be fought to its conclusion because you're not supporting the Palestinian state, because you're applauding, the downfall of Assad. So that's what they're saying, and they're mad at me for calling them out on that. It is what it is. It's I can sympathize with the anti-Assad crowd to a point, but here's the other thing that's happened. It's a very interesting thing that's happened. The whitewashing of Jolani, this Al-Qaeda head chopper who has blood of Americans on his hands, who was the deputy of al-Baghdadi with ISIS, who ran Al-Qaeda's operation in Syria before transition to Nusra, because politically, I always love it. Well, he backed away from Al-Qaeda. They had a difference of opinion. And Jolani has matured now. He's with HTS, Sham, and they're not Al-Qaeda. They're the Al-Qaeda, the same damn people. And they brought in even worse people. They brought in Uyghur head choppers. They brought in Turkmen head choppers and Chechen head choppers. The worst people in the world had gathered in under this umbrella called HTS. And Jolani's the guy, and the CIA has successfully rebranded him because they brought in CNN, who's known for their objective journalism. Just look at how they rescued a prisoner from that Syrian prison. But they brought in a CNN person who interviewed him, and he said, the head chopping, I was a silly little boy back then when I was chopping off heads. It's not who I am today. I'm a nice guy, all reformed. You can't reform Al-Qaeda. You can't reform that mindset because it's married to a perversion of Islam that's unsupportable, and yet which is supported by so many. And that's the thing that really bothers me about the anti-Assad crowd, is how readily they're able to say, well, but this is what has to happen. So that's, again, now we come in back to the Muslim Brotherhood thing. It doesn't have to happen. That's not a vision of Islam that's universally embraced. Extremism, where jihad stops being about the internal struggle and is about being the external struggle, where you're imposing your values on people through the sword. If that's what you believe in, that's okay. I respect that. But I'll fight you to the death now, because that's not what I believe in. I believe that people should peacefully coexist. But I'm not going to sit here and say, if the Islamic community is going to condemn the Crusaders, as they continue to do, rightfully so, conversion by the sword, and then they're going to turn around, but it's okay for us to convert by the sword. No, it's not. Conversion by the sword is never acceptable. And I'm sorry, if that's your core belief as a Muslim, then we have a fundamental disagreement. A fundamental disagreement. And you will be opposed violently by people like me who refuse to accept that. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we're at with some of these anti-Assad elements, because I watched, nice people, I appreciate their point of view, and I thank them for allowing me there. But I was invited into a group to listen, to talk about this. And I was criticized at one point in time because I put out a tweet that used the Lawrence of Arabia film. And in the end, the Damascus Parliament, where the Arab tribes are sitting trying to solve the problem of governing Damascus, while the British held out because the British said the Arabs will never be able to govern. And Lawrence is there, and the Halitat and the Harith are shouting and insults and pulling out pistols and swords. And he's like, you have to talk. And what happened is it turned into a shouting match, just an outright shouting match, screaming, nothing, threats. And I was told that's racist for you to put that up there. I'm like, but it's my experience. It's my experience. but I'm willing to give you another shot. That night's event turned into exactly that. It turned into exactly that. And it was more fundamental because it turned into a Sunni versus Shia thing. A Sunni versus Shia thing. And it got ugly, really ugly. And I have to tell you, I walked away from that with no confidence that the the anti-Assad group had a sound vision. They're willing to let Turkey govern Syria. They're willing to let Turkey. So you can't, they're no longer Syrian nationals. And then when you confront them that, I said, but then you're not a Syrian national. At least Bashar al-Assad said, I am a Syrian. You're saying you're not. And they're saying, yes, but the Syrian nationals is sort of a Western imposition. We're a multiculturalist. Well, you're not because you can't stand the Shia, but and you're not because the head choppers are taking off the heads of Christians. And I will personally intervene. Well, then get off your ass and fly over to Syria and intervene because it's happening right now. It's happening right now. The oppression of the Alawites. Well, they're Shia, sort of. That's okay because they're not really humans, by the way. They're just Shia. We don't agree with them because they perverted Islam. I'm being oversimplified here, but this is a very, very complicated situation full of prejudice, hatred, mistrust, and you can't, again, when the anti-Assad group said we don't believe in Syria and we're willing to let Turkey occupy us, and that the occupier, the Turkish proxy occupying, can be Al-Qaeda reformed as HTS, they lost me. They lost me, and they're never going to get me back. I don't know what the future of Syria is, but I can tell you that the future of Syria with Jolani as its head is not going to be a good future. And I can also tell you that when you lose Syrian national cohesion, don't talk to me ever again about it, because they contradicted themselves. Come on, guys.
A few hours ago, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Andrei Belousov, made a rather alarming statement. In particular, he said that a direct clash between NATO and Russia could happen in Europe in the next 10 years. According to him, the Russian Federation should prepare for a possible military conflict with the North Atlantic Alliance. Andrei Belousov also noted that in 2024, the Russian army was quite successful in solving the tasks set against the background of a tough confrontation with the collective West, and that this confrontation continues to grow. According to the Russian minister, in order to cope with serious challenges, the Russian army must become receptive to innovation and more flexible. Against this backdrop, he ordered the Russian generals to continue fulfilling their tasks not only in the Special Military Operations Zone, but also to ensure a military presence in Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, Transnistria, and the Caucasus. In addition, he also ordered all structures of the Russian army, including strategic aviation and missile forces, to be in constant combat readiness, and be ready for any development of events, including a direct military conflict with NATO. According to him, the key decisions taken by the North Atlantic Alliance during July's NATO summit in Washington indicate that the United States and other NATO countries are taking the idea of attacking the Russian Federation seriously. Based on this, Andrei Belousov also ordered the rapid development of the so-called end-to-end technologies of the Russian army. In particular, we are talking about quantum computing and communications, machine-to-machine interaction, high-speed secure data transmission, robotics, big data processing, and artificial intelligence. The head of the Russian military department stressed that these technologies will allow the Russian army to successfully confront NATO countries at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels. It is noteworthy that immediately after that, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation held a briefing for journalists. During this briefing, representatives of the Defense Department officially stated that on December 14, in the zone of a special military operation, tactical aviation, with the help of missile forces, destroyed one Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet, one an MPQ-65 fire control radar, and 4 American Patriot air defense systems, along with combat crews. At the same time, it is reported that the combat crews of these U.S. air defense systems consisted of active-duty NATO officers. However, the losses of NATO forces in Ukraine did not end there. As it turned out, on the night of December 16, Russia launched a fairly powerful missile attack on military targets in Khmelnytsky, Cherkasy, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions. According to independent monitoring services, about 20 powerful explosions were recorded in these regions. It is reliably known that during this attack, Russia used dozens of ballistic and cruise missiles. Simultaneously with this, dozens of Iranian kamikaze drones also rained down on military facilities in these Ukrainian regions. So, in the Khmelnytsky region, Russian Iskander-M ballistic missiles, together with kamikaze drones, once again hit the Starokostiantinov airbase. It is reported that the Russians launched a missile attack on this airbase immediately after military engineers from NATO countries were spotted on it. It is reported that they were trying to restore the infrastructure of this military facility after previous Russian missile attacks. At the moment, a large fire is observed on the territory of this airbase, which indicates that Russian missiles managed to hit an ammunition dump and a gasoline stowage. In the Cherkasy region, Russian missiles hit and destroyed an energy infrastructure facility that was working for the needs of the Ukrainian army. It is reported that as a result of this attack, local military enterprises and a military base of the Ukrainian army, in the southwestern part of the city of Cherkasy, were left without electricity. In the Chernihiv region, Russian ballistic missiles, together with guided aerial bombs of the Fab family, hit and destroyed several enemy military targets. It is reported that these were the places of the deployment of the Ukrainian soldiers and so-called foreign mercenaries. My dear truth seekers, it is important to note that Russia launched a missile attack on the Chernihiv region immediately after enemy activity was noticed there. In particular, Russian intelligence was able to discover in the Chernihiv region Western heavy military equipment, with new tactical signs in the form of white squares. All this indicates that, after the failure of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region and the Donbass, the Ukrainian General Staff, together with its NATO military advisors, are planning a new offensive, but this time against the Bryansk region. In this regard, in the last 48 hours alone, the Russian aerospace forces, together with missile forces, have launched more than 100 rocket attacks on the border areas of the Chernihiv region. It is noteworthy that many Western military experts from numerous American and European analytical centers also expressed confidence that the Ukrainian army is preparing an offensive against the Bryansk region. According to them, this offensive by the Ukrainian army can begin immediately after Russian troops establish full control over the most important city of Donbass, Pokrovsk. And finally, in the Sumy region, Russian ballistic and cruise missiles rained down on the territory of the deployment of the units of the motorized brigades of the Ukrainian army, which are actively involved in the invasion of the Kursk region. In addition, Russian missiles also destroyed a classified enemy command post, along with Ukrainian and NATO officers. According to an unnamed source in the Russian intelligence service, the day before this missile attack, Russian intelligence managed to find out that NATO forces were preparing another missile attack on Russian territory. It is reported that in the destroyed command post, there were 8 Ukrainian officers, as well as 3 US and 2 British Army officers, who were supposed to coordinate and fire ATACMS ballistic missiles deep into Russian territory. Thus, thanks to the vigilance and professional actions of the Russian military intelligence, NATO forces failed to carry out another provocation and fire Western long-range missiles against Russian regions.
Included as anything specific, but this definitely feels like some sort of warning for Donald Trump. It's like they are putting something together in the Biden administration and using it along with the deep state to create something that will stop Trump from getting in office. And they claim that they have no answers, but somebody has the answer.
Let's go. I'm going to throw something out at you right up front here. They know exactly who owns these drones and what they're doing in the sky. But they don't want to tell you for a reason. The reason is the United States government and the deep staters involved in it, they don't want to scare you with their own inadequacy. Folks, I'm telling you right now, they know who these drones belong to. We are at real risk here. Our airspace is not secure. They don't know what to do with these drones. And, you know, I said bottom line up front, so I hate teases because they're for morons. Oh, stay tuned later in the show. If you like the show, you'll stay no matter what. I'm 95% sure, if not more, it's China or some foreign adversary. Has some role in it. Could be wrong. I'm throwing it out there, and I'm basing it on a few different things. Let's dig in. Receipts matter, okay? Congressman Jeff Van Drew will be on my radio show later. He represents an area in New Jersey where they've had this issue, right? He was a former Democrat, now a Republican. He'll be on the radio show later today. If you want to tune in, you can check it out on Rumble and Locals. The last hour, of course, is for local subscribers. We're doing a conversion, by the way, soon over to Rumble Premium. So hang out. I got a few questions about that from listeners. Here's a tweet from Congressman Van Drew. Folks, I have no reason to believe this guy's lying about any of this. He says, first, the Chinese spy balloon drifted across U.S. airspace for a week. Yeah, that's right. Now, unidentified drones are flying over New Jersey, avoiding radar detection. Gaps, listen to the last line. Gaps in our airspace are being exploited. And because of it, the safety of Americans is at risk. Dan, you're throwing this out there. You think it may be China or some foreign adversary. Why? Because I'm listening to people who are in the know in the area who are probably being told things but can't say it. Gaps in our airspace are being exploited. And because of it, the safety of Americans is at risk. This is the congressman in that area. Watch this interview with him on Fox talking about these drone orb UAP sightings in the area. I want you to listen carefully to the language. Sometimes they know things, but they don't want to say things. Check this out.
You see, Trump National Golf Club isn't far from the Picatinny Arsenal military base, which some thought may be behind the drones. But the base tells Fox News, quote, while the source and cause of these aircraft operating in our area remain unknown, we can confirm that they are not the result of any Picatinny Arsenal related activities. Now, Fox News also spoke with Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey. He said it doesn't appear the pilots of these drones are breaking any laws, rules, or regulations. They're staying out of restricted airspace, which he says is an indication that they know what they're doing.
I do not believe it's the U.S. military. And if it is, and if they're doing exercises, shame on them for the disorganized way they are doing it. I don't believe it is them. I am hopeful.
Now, mind you, in the very beginning of this video, I definitely stated that I think it's something with the Biden administration, only because of all the lawfare and everything that's been going on. However, at this point, I don't know.
Well, it is not a foreign adversary, yet I do worry about that.
Yeah, and this will be a main topic of conversation at a House hearing on Capitol Hill today that starts at 2 o'clock, focused on the safety implications of drone technology. And Congressman Van Drew tells Fox that the United States is behind, specifically China, with this technology, and that we need to do a better job of defending against and integrating drone technology. We'll send it back to you, Dan.
All right.
Folks, the congressman in and around the area is, quote, hoping that the U.S. is not behind this China thing. He's hoping it's not a foreign adversary. Listen, hope is not a solution. Now, I'm reading a Rumble chat while the clip is playing. And I get it. No matter what you say in this, I love everyone in the chat. Obviously, everybody's here. We open up the chat so you can have your opinion. No matter what you say, you piss people off.
Yes.
You tell people it's aliens, they're like, you're a conspiracy theorist. You tell people it's nothing to worry about. It's just Amazon or whatever. They're like, oh, my gosh, Dan, this could be a real threat. You tell people, hey, man, I think this is China or a foreign adversary. Here's what she's like, you're trying to induce panic. I'm not inducing panic kills. Don't shit the bed ever. I'm exchanging information with you. You do what you want with it. My job is to get you information, period.
Now, I can't pinpoint this on nobody specifically, but I will say that the government definitely has more information about the situation than they are, trying to reveal to the American people, especially considering it is the Biden administration. The fact that it's been near Trump's golf course makes it even more suspicious, which is why Alex Jones just a few days ago posted a message online trying to warn Trump. Somebody says, they absolutely do. My first thought is they can't shoot them down if they are over homes. As I've read, some of these drones are as big as a small car. Wow. If they, it says, if they are homegrown, they still have to answer for why are they there. I don't like the possible answers. Yeah, man, it's getting real sticky out here, man, for sure. And in New Jersey, it's just getting worse and worse. It says a New Jersey state senator claims there's a massive cover-up going on with these drones. Quote, there must be something going on that they can't tell us because they are so fearful of what the public is going to do when they hear what the drones is doing. I mean, of course, the government and these political entities do their best to try to, feed the American people information in doses in certain ways so that we can, digest it in the way that they want us to. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that this far-fetched. Somebody said, I recently read this morning from an anonymous source that they are searching for a dirty bomb. The source claims they are working on that project. Supposedly, these drones are made to detect radiation. So it could be something helpful, maybe. But if it was truly something helpful, then I don't see why it would be something that they need to cover up. So right now, this is another video that just popped up. It says this is really happening in New Jersey, UFO or drone mystery. We got some music with it. Says something strange is happening in New Jersey. Witnesses are reporting mysterious flying objects. Are they drones, UFOs, or part of a larger mystery? 1 second. Hey, Jaden, you too loud, son. I'm sorry, y'all. But they are drones. Are they drones, UFOs, or part of a larger mystery? Could they be how you said, a psyop or an unexplained phenomenon? Watch the footage and let us know what you think is going on. Y'all already seen the footage being repeated there. So, yeah, man, I honestly, personally, I don't know. Alejandro Mayorkas says that people in New Jersey are seeing so many drones at night because of FAA allowed drones to fly at night 15 months ago. The gaslighting continues, Colin Rugg wrote. Mayorkas said the government is on it in regards to the drones before claiming they didn't have the authority to address the drone situation. So make this big, man, and
we
check
do
it out.
see,
Started from the beginning to see what we got.
Absolutely, George, and thank you very much for having me. There's no question that people are seeing drones, and I want to assure the American public that we in the federal government have deployed additional resources, personnel, technology to assist the New Jersey State Police in addressing the drone sightings. Some of those drone sightings are, in fact, drones. Some are manned aircraft that are commonly mistaken for drones. And we do see duplicative reporting. But there's no question that drones are being sighted. Let me set the record straight here, George. There are thousands of drones flown every day in the United States. Recreational drones, commercial drones. That is the reality. And in September of 2023, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, changed the rules so that drones could fly at night. And that may be one of the reasons why now people are seeing more drones than they did before, especially from dawn to dusk. And so that is the reality. But I want to assure the American public that we are on it. We are working in close coordination with state and local authorities. And it is critical, as we all have said for a number of years, that we need from Congress additional authorities to address the drone situation. Our authorities currently are limited and they are set to expire. We need them extended and expanded.
What exactly do you need?
We want state and local authorities to also have the ability to counter drone activity under federal supervision. That is one important element that we have requested, and we've heard it echoed by the state and local officials themselves.
Don't worry about it. The government is on it. The government is on it. If this guy says that, they're doing something about it, it's a lie. I will say that right now, this is pretty concerning, and I don't know what to think. I don't know if it is a threat to the American people, to us. I don't know, if it's something foreign. I don't know if it's something local. I don't know if this is somehow aimed at Donald Trump in some sort of way. Like, it's so much information coming out about this that I don't know which direction I want to go. But the Pentagon is saying that the drones are actually aliens.
These are not U.S. military drones. Again, this is being investigated by local law enforcement. What our initial assessment here is that these are not drones or activities coming from a foreign entity or adversary.
You're telling me we don't know what the hell these drones are in New Jersey are? Is that correct? That's right. It's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. That's madness that we don't know what these drones are.
From the Coast Guard, who said that one of their 47-foot motor lifeboats was followed by between 12 and 30 of these drones as they went through the water.
These are 6-foot drones that are somehow evading our detection. They are not being detected.
They're saying no threat, but how the hell do they know? They don't know anything. They don't know what it is. They don't know where it come from. They don't know nothing.
They know that they can't track them. They know that they don't emit a signal. They know that they can't see them when they turn their lights out. They also indicated that they don't know where they come from. They don't know where they go to.
One family claims they followed a drone in their car, and while it hovered above them, the clock in their car changed times.
Some of the FBI agents that have been assigned to look into this have reported drones flying over their home.
It's right here over at Picatinny, there was a drone just hanging out. I put my drone up in the air and went towards it.
I had full battery life. Not 3 minutes into the flight, I lost control of the drone. Warning on my screen, lost control, and my drone started going down, dead.
These are fully charged batteries. It's 2 batteries that have died within seconds, and the drone went up and like a couple feet off the table, and then came right back down.
Okay, you see it? You see how it goes? See how it goes? And then it becomes a spacecraft or aircraft or whatever you want to call it.
What the fuck is that, bro? Did it just get smaller? Bro, what?
Above the ocean, and it was low, very low, but so bright and so clear, and it was huge. Like when you...
I'm concerned. I issued a letter to ask for more information, and I think there should be a lot more transparency about that.
Can you make that make more sense? Because I think people in New York and New Jersey see drones the size of an SUV over their house every night and think that that doesn't make any sense.
I understand why people would be looking at this and being concerned about it. We're concerned about it too, which is why we have the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. My goodness, looking at this, and we're taking it seriously.
I think the best response to this is obviously just reading the comments. This means that it's their drones. When dealing with government, you have to read between the lines. They are never telling us the truth. Somebody tagged Alex Jones in this for sure. I would love to get his take on this. Sure they are. This has to be some kind of distraction from something really big going on. Even if these are aliens, they would never tell us that. Here we go. Yeah, man, we don't know what's going on. You see what they got going on right here. Yeah. So, in the means, that's actually a pretty cool name. Anyhow, back.
Any of it regarding what's happening. Over a year ago, we warned you here on this show of a massive false flag operation that was coming. They would use a large-scale UFO invasion, some sort of weird distraction, UFOs, something, in order to carry this out. Multiple sources on our show, live guests on our show, warning us about that this was coming. In fact, we spoke to sources in September that told us this would start in the days following the election. Yeah, I talked about this in September with some sources who said these sources, by the way, who were read into the program, they were right. This started happening right after the election. I mean, it was unbelievable. I was sitting there saying, here we go. Now we're starting to see all these drone sightings. Yep, they were correct about this. And last year, we spoke to a former FBI agent who was in charge of what was really known as the FBI's X-Files. They warned us that a fake alien invasion would be taking place. They warned us that a cover-up was this was for something larger. So you can actually go and seek that interview out. We have it right here on the channel. It's about a year old at this point. So we've been hearing about this operation for almost a year now, and now that moment is here. So what exactly are all these UFOs, all of these drones doing in the sky? It appears to be coming to a head before President Trump takes office. So he was just asked about this 2 hours ago, and he said our government knows exactly where these are coming from.
First of all, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Can you comment on the drones that are flying around New Jersey and the ports? And it seems like the American people have a big disconnect.
The government knows what is happening. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy, because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out. Even if they were late, they'd blast it. something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should, because the people are really, I mean, they happen to be over Bedminster. Want to know the truth? They're very close to Bedminster. I think maybe I won't spend the weekend in Bedminster. I've decided to cancel my trip.
Yeah,
Maybe I won't go there.
Over the president's house.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't know. And the Pentagon is today, this afternoon, denying that they're military, saying, no, we're doubling down. We don't know what these are. These are not U.S. military. Absolutely lying to us. I mean, absolutely lying to us. So what would cause widespread panic and force us into like a new round of lockdowns? Well, force NORAD, to take over operational control of the United States following the continuity of government, of course, instead of, force us into martial law. Of course, the head of NORAD would become the de facto president of the United States. Well, what could do that? Perhaps a missing nuclear or biological weapon that was let loose in the United States. That seems to be what's going on here today. Everyone, including local, state, and federal authorities, is desperately searching for answers as to what all of these drones are right now. There's been a notable lack of disclosure about any of it regarding what's actually happening in the skies above New Jersey, one of the most restricted airspaces in the world, by the way. In the world. Drone experts are now coming out saying there's like no reason for drones to be flying at night. They're not meant to fly at night. They can't see at night. The only reason they would need to fly at night is because if they were equipped with some sort of radioactive material detectors and they're looking for something. They're looking for perhaps a dirty bomb or radioactive material, missing nuclear warhead. Well, that's what they'll tell us anyway, right? They'll tell us something like that in order to distract us from what's really going on. So we now know, according to information that was just posted, that on December 2nd, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission disclosed that a medical device containing radioactive material was lost in transit in New Jersey. What? Essentially a dirty bomb or a small dirty bomb is missing? Okay, the event notification report, as published here in Zero Hedge with the manifest, shows that this thing has been lost in transit. The shipping container arrived at its destination damaged and empty. Oh, we've lost some radioactive material. The licensee has filed a claim with the shipper. If the source is not located within 30 days, the licensee will follow up with a full written report as to include the root causes and corrective actions. The email from the Cancer Center located in Newfield continued. Now, Zero Hedge writes, one theory points to drones equipped with payload sensors designed to be detecting direct radioactive material right now. Okay, given ongoing and heightened threat of Al-Qaeda on the East Coast, others believe this could be part of a large psyop, according to Zero Hedge, aimed at pushing through new drone legislation in Washington, D.C., so that we wouldn't be able to use individual drones anymore, that it would be massive military or commercial grade drones and massive new legislation that would prevent us from doing that. Of course, other people saying, oh, it could be Iranian or Chinese operators in order to like create mass hysteria in the United States.
Even Fox News said, well, this sounds like the Chinese spy balloon where they didn't knock it down until after it had already collected all kinds of data for the Chinese government. They're still saying that, even though that's been widely debunked.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, they're continuing with that story about China and Iran. And we would know specifically all of these craft. We would know about an Iranian ship or any of that off the coast of the United States. We would know with pinpoint accuracy. We watch the transports of everything in Iran. We would know that there's a giant mothership off the coast of the United States. It's ridiculous. Even the Washington Post. Go ahead.
Sorry, just real quick, that like the idea that like if the government comes out and says, well, this is Chinese, this is Iranian, they're basically saying like we are completely incompetent. So that they can't do, like it can't be that because like that would there's like yeah, they can sneak up on us and we can't do anything about it. Like for real. I mean,
it's impossible. We know exactly where they are, right? So the idea that a massive mothership is just sitting off the coast of New Jersey, like it's it's ridiculous, off of like the Jersey Shore. So even Josh Rogan, who is the Washington Post, writes for the Washington Post. So the Washington Post saying this, Josh Rogan posted this: if these are really Defense Department drones doing radiation sniffing for possible dirty bombs, one could understand why they wouldn't want to admit that and panic people. But at this point, the lack of disclosure is damaging public trust. Time to come clean.
Word.
The Washington Post. I spoke to Ashton Forbes just a few minutes ago. Ashton Forbes is a physicist and an investigator, and deeply connected to the studying of the disappearance of Malaysian flight MH370. And he says, that he has a theory, at least on this drone piece, and he thinks that it makes sense that these would be out at night in some sort of a mesh to try to stop maybe perhaps an incoming hypersonic missile, if that was perhaps one of the reasons. But take a listen to his assessment of these potential drone sightings.
So we know that we've got full motion video coverage of the entire planet. This was actually admitted to in the UFO hearing just a month ago by both Michael Schellenberger and Tim Gallaudet. So we know what these drones are. Maybe the FBI doesn't know because they don't have access to that information, but the NRO, the CIA, the NSA, the NGA, these organizations know exactly what these drones are. So the question is, why are they lying to us about them? And I also think that drones has become the code word for UFOs now as well, which should make us wonder, what are these things flying around? Is there even somebody inside of some of these UFOs that we're seeing? Is that even a requirement? The theory that I kind of like the best, and also I just want to point out that Congress is apparently getting a classified briefing about these drones that are flying around as well. So if there was nothing there, why would they be getting a classified briefing about it? And some of the sightings have indicated that they are transmedium, that they might be coming out of the water. In other cases, they've been saying that they're not giving off any signals or any frequencies, which I'm not really sure what that means, but these could be some of the observables that we see in UFOs. Now, the flip side of it is there is mass hysteria going on right now. We've reached the point now where this is like, it's a self-perpetuating thing where people are now just misidentifying planes and other stuff, and they're claiming that they are, these UFOs or drones when they probably aren't. So there's a lot of mud in the water that's making it very difficult to sift through. The only way we could really get forward on an answer is if we were to get high quality, like military or intelligence grade, like infrared footage of one of these things where we could actually analyze it. And I think the likelihood of that is slim. Now, my personal theory that I like, that Clint Russell and I were talking about just a couple of days ago, was this idea that, like, what if these are some type of defense mechanism, like a mesh network, like a fence, essentially, that is set up, ready to intercept some type of hypersonic weapon, either coming from outer space or coming from like a submarine off the coast or somewhere else, where seconds matter. And even the deployment time would make it less likely that you'd be able to intercept an incoming ICBM or something like that. That would actually make sense in terms of why the local governments have no idea what's going on. And it would make sense in terms of why federal government would not be able to speak about it and potentially do a classified briefing.
But then what's the plan, though? Like, they had no plan to answer what would inevitably be questions if that were the case, that it's some kind of classified defense test. That's what he's saying. Right. Right. And then did they have any plan in place when people started noticing and asking questions?
Yeah, and that's the question, right? And some are suggesting, oh, this is, Project Bluebeam, right? Which aims to, claims global elites, of course, are going to fake a large-scale invasion, large-scale alien invasion to instill a new world order. Mm-hmm. I know that, Alex Jones has been talking about that. I don't know exactly the new world order piece of this, but certainly a lockdown and a martial law strategy ahead of President Trump taking office would not be out of the question. Certainly they've tried to assassinate him. So once you have like assassination on the table, and that's already been attempted multiple times,
sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit, really, at this point. But of course, the real focus is now around these nuclear weapons and the missing Ukrainian nukes that Americans apparently have their hands on and potentially have gone lost. So where are these nuclear weapons? Where are these nuclear warheads after the fall of the Soviet Union that the United States apparently has their hands on? So is that what they're looking for? Are they looking for a nuclear weapon right now? Again, President Trump is right. They know exactly what's going on. The Pentagon is stonewalling on this issue. And meanwhile, they all think we're stupid, that what we're seeing in the air, in the sky, are airplanes. Here's a representative. Here's failed Representative Adam Kinzinger, douchebag Adam Kinzinger, who says, these are not drones. These are not UFOs. Everyone, you're all idiots. These are all just airplanes. He's analyzed every video. Watch.
And what I'm hearing from FBI is, we don't see a threat here. And look, honestly, every video I've seen, and I've spent the last couple of days looking at every one of these videos, every video I have seen on Twitter, on the internet, are all airplanes. They're literally all airplanes. Some of them will show an airplane that's kind of stable out there and says that's a drone. And actually, it's an airplane flying towards you at 30,000 feet. And I can see the lighting on it. And if there are drones out there, by the way, and if any of these pictures that they have shown are actual drones, these drones then are complying with FAA lighting requirements, a green on the right, a red on the left with a strobe. And so it's not Iran, it's not aliens if there are drones. My guess is if there are drones, again, because again, all I've seen are airplanes, then it is more than likely some company that's out testing drones or something like that and has no requirement to tell the public that they're doing it because they're actually operating these things legally. There have been no accusations of illegal operations. By the way, as a pilot myself, I can fly over a military base whenever I want. Those restrictions don't exist. So I think there's a lot of mass hysteria, and I've heard stories of people pointing lasers at these quote-unquote drones, and then the drones' lights go off. Actually, let's be clear. I've been lased as a pilot before. You're supposed to turn off all your lights once you get lased so that they can't find you because it can actually damage your eyes.
Right.
So, yeah, I think
Yeah. So how does he then account for, you can just fly over military bases? So drones, now we have reports at a Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio that drones force the airspace blockage there for multiple hours at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So, okay.
Also, is it very responsible to encourage people to be doing that?
Yeah. So everyone get out your lasers, I guess, now.
Or even civilian pilots. Like, hey, you can just go fly right over military bases. That's cool.
Well, I don't know. We're going to continue on the story. I'm stunned that we've had whistleblowers, we've had individuals on our show who've been predicting this for months, and now it's here. And so, conspiracy knowers, not conspiracy theorists. Like,
well, yes, we have the shirt.
I feel like in general, people have kind of forgotten that a lot of this started in the UK. Is when this entire thing started. It was around bases in the UK. So it's not just
right near Rendlesham Forest, the famous Rendlesham Forest case in the early 1980s. Go back and research it. And U.S. airmen who were there with UK airmen at the Royal Air Force Base there, and what happened at Rendlesham Forest. So that's where like a lot of this began. But yeah, it's mostly just focused on New Jersey at this point. But well, I don't know. The President-elect Trump takes office on January 20th, and so all of this is happening conveniently right before then. So, and I think DC Drano posted, say the timing of this seems very, very strange. Like it feels like some sort of a massive psyop, some sort of a massive false flag. Something is going on, and I don't think we have the answers to it just yet, as some may claim they do, but I don't think we do.
Right. I mean, it doesn't seem like Adam Kinzinger did a lot of study for that piece on CNN. He's just spitballing.
He watched a lot of videos. He watched every video.
He watched every one.
That's all he did all weekend.
Okay.
And then he cried about it.
All right. Well, last week we showed you this fake CNN video of Clarissa Ward rescuing a Syrian prisoner who was freed from a Syrian prison. We're guessing that it's fake based on many different data points. And CNN now has been forced to admit that it was a bit of a sham. And the man that they reportedly rescued was what they call now a regime torturer. Way to go. Way to go. As a reminder, here's the video that they posted as if they were rescuing someone from what they called the Assad regime. People were quick to point out many flaws, such as this man looks well-fed and groomed for having been in prison for 3 months in this jail cell under a sleeping bag. I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you. We're not going to watch the whole minute and 47. But here they are like, ooh, someone here? What's going on? So let's just watch a little bit and we'll stop because it's...
I can't tell, though. It might just be a blanket. But it's the only cell that's locked. Is he gonna shoot it?
I'm gonna shoot the lock off.
The camera off while he shoots the lock off the cell door. We go in to get a closer look. It's still not clear
oh my
if
God.
there is something under the blanket.
Is there a man under that blanket? And he didn't hear the gunshot echoing through a cement building where we just shot a lock off?
He's napping.
He's just napping. Like, I'm a light sleeper, but I think a gunshot reverberating through there. It's like a gun range. Oh, maybe he's wearing protective percussion
Shoot it. Yeah, point a gun at him because let's see.
There's a man under here. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. Well fed.
Civilian, he says. I'm a civilian.
Yeah. And then they go outside and he looks right up at the sun. Yeah. Oh my God. She's so.
He's from the city of Humps and has been in the cell for 3 months. Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
Okay. Also, her bio. Let's go ahead and. So then she's like, "Let's take him outside. Let's get him some water. Does anyone have water?" Her bio says she speaks Arabic, but she does not bother to speak to him in any kind of Arabic at all.
No, it's got to be English for an American audience.
Right, but if you, who does she care about then? Like she's trying to tell this guy, "You're okay," and then she tells a translator to tell him that she can't tell the kid.
Well,
yeah, it's all performance.
Am I the only one that noticed that? Like, so they shot the lock off of like that sort of back room of like cells, but his cell was wide open. That is not standard practice for why is the guy still in his cell when the door is wide open?
It's literally like the minions who just walk through when they say, "Let's leave the jail," and then they just walk through.
They just turn sideways and they like
just
squeeze right through. And they're like, "Oh, I could have gotten out of here the whole time."
Right.
I just like this so much.
Now we've seen her sort of stage these attacks before, or these, dramatic news pieces, such as this one when she was said she was under fire in Israel after the war in Gaza began. We'll watch just a tiny bit of this as well.
Clarissa is on the ground right now. Clarissa, tell us what's happening.
Stand by.
Hi, John. So forgive me, I have a slightly unelegant position, but we have just had a massive barrage of rockets coming in here, not too far from us. So we have had to take shelter here by the roads.
Okay, so it was, we'll go ahead and stop that. It was later reported that not so far from us was doing some heavy lifting in that sentence.
Yeah.
So the community notes took that Syrian prisoner video and they just handled it, and I loved watching it. But then also an independent fact checker named Verify did some real journalism as well. And they found out this rescued Syrian prisoner was in fact a first lieutenant in the Syrian Air Force intelligence with a long rap sheet of alleged crimes. They say his name is Salama Mohammed Salama, known as Abu Hamza. And he is a first lieutenant in the Air Force, notorious for his activities, such as frequently being stationed at checkpoints in the area in an area that was infamous for civilian abuses. He reportedly managed several of these checkpoints and was involved in theft, extortion, coercing residents into becoming informants. And he has only been there for less than a month, according to locals. So, and when you look at this, you think of, that's actually kind of racist the way they pulled this off. They just thought any old Arabic looking guy would do. Like, oh, those Arabs, they're savages. Nobody will know who this guy really is, as if they don't have access to the internet or any kind of research, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, that's arrogant. Here is what CNN now says to the New York Post when they were asked about this. They said, "We have subsequently been investigating his background and we're aware he may have given us a false identity. We're continuing our reporting into this and the wider story." But they still maintain that this was not staged.
Right.
Sure, it wasn't. And they really did find him there. Here's what they told the Post. They say, that CNN denies allegations that the piece was fabricated. No one other than the CNN team was aware of our plans to visit the prison building featured in our report that day. The events transpired as they appear in our film.
Right.
So you can just march into these, prisons now, is what they say, even though Al-Qaeda is in charge in Syria, but they were just like, oh, we happened upon it. We woke up that day and said, where should we go? Should we check out the local prison, see if anyone's still there? So, okay, they're investigating though. So it's still up on her profile. The comments are gold. When other CNN anchors like Caitlin Collins have also retweeted it, those comments are super fun. I encourage you to watch on X.
Well, I love that these CNN anchors, like Caitlin Collins, posted that report. She's like, "This is incredible."
That's what she said.
And then I responded on Twitter.
Yeah, Clayton says Oscar worthy. Actually,
Oscar worthy, incredible, really.
Right.
I just want to know. I want to know who they're gonna get to fake eyewitness to when they're investigating themselves. Like, who are they going to interview for that?
Right.
We went into a CNN office and there was an intern that's been locked in here for 4 months.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I can't believe the sunlight outside. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's wild. So, okay, they'll investigate themselves and we'll see. Well, the rest of us are like, that doesn't seem quite so right. So it doesn't help with the plummeting confidence in the legacy media now, does it?
We have to tell you a huge scam right now that's happening across the United States, house stealing. The FBI says this is one of the largest and growing scams in the United States where scammers access your home's equity. America is sitting on trillions of dollars in home equity right now. Many of you have a home that has a lot of equity in your home. Well, what if you went to bed and then you woke up and found the title to your home had been taken from you? This is happening all across the country. And the scariest part is you won't even find out about it until unpaid loan bills or foreclosure notices start arriving in your mailbox. But by then the damage has already been done and you're left with a legal or financial nightmare to deal with. Yes, people stealing the title of your home. And all they have to do, they have to get a simple notary and then submit that to the county. And that's how these scammers are doing it. And you won't even know about it. And that's where our friends at Home Title Lock comes in. Now, I am a customer of Home Title Lock. I think this is vital for every American. It's a small price to pay for you to get your home title protected by Home Title Lock. And the best part is you can get a 30-day free trial. Just right now, 30-day free trial. Well, they were actually scanned to see if your title is safe and make sure that you have triple lock protection. And they will give you a complimentary title history of your home. All you have to do is go to hometitlelock.com/redacted. Click on the link in the description box. Again, this Democrats today. Harris is debating her future, according to multiple reports. Lots of buzz and a bit of drama inside of the Kamala Harris's inner circle about whether she should head back to California and run for governor in 2026. Now, the big question on the table, though, is does she focus on making a play for the presidency in 2028 or governor in 2026 and just focus on running for governor of California? A gig, let's be honest, feels a bit more in her reach and likely to win. Very liberal state. And I think they probably, if you're in California, they probably love her.
Oh my God. I mean,
but think about it.
Only those that have no critical thought skills. I mean, most of them would think, could we possibly do worse than Gavin Newsom? Yes, you could.
Yeah, you could actually.
Absolutely could.
Because after all, the destruction of California can be traced directly to Kamala Harris. That's not hyperbole. She's responsible for the law that decriminalized theft. Yes, she made theft legal, for crying out loud. So her hands are all over the collapse of California. So you know that's why you had such a rise in theft. Was it under like under $900 or over $900 or something like that?
I don't remember the details.
The exact numbers, but yeah, those are now, you don't have to worry about it. You can just break into stores there in California. Philip, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just the balls she must have to go I would, if I had just lost a presidential election like that and just seen like one, she couldn't get the nomination for the previous election because she got like 3% of the Democratic vote, so she's not popular. I would not risk like the absolute embarrassment of the possibility of losing a governorship in California. Like at that point, I would go just live on a farm somewhere and be quiet, like not telling her to be quiet.
But she can command, right. She can command a large speaking fee anywhere she goes at a lot of these Democratic or war funding, anything that Rachel Maddow does, she can do too, basically. And they make a lot of money. She doesn't have to do that, in my opinion. But it seems like she may be impervious to embarrassment if her campaign was any indication.
Well, reports today are swirling that some of Kamala's team thinks that she's got what it takes to run for president once again. After all, she did raise over $1 billion, like in that 100-day window.
But that fundraising was based on Trump derangement syndrome, where people were just motivated to keep Donald Trump from winning the office. I don't think it was based on her platforms because we didn't know what they were. I don't think it was based on her personality because it was just a nonsensical cackle. So how can you do that in California without a Donald Trump to run against?
She'd have to run against probably JD Vance, right? Good luck with that. That would be fascinating to watch.
For president,
For
JD
president.
Vance is not going to run for the governor of California.
Well, no, I'm sorry, for the presidency. Yeah, but if she's going to, that's what my point is, that her team thinks that she should run for president because after all, she ran and made $1 billion, and they think that she should do it again. They say they managed to polish up her reputation along the way. Remember how in the trash her reputation was, like in the beginning of the spring of this past year? You had like liberals all over television talking about Kamala Harris's reputation, that she's a huge drag on the ticket. Maybe they should get rid of Kamala Harris. And then suddenly there was like this revitalization of her personality and reputation.
She was recast as brilliant and charismatic. Yes.
Right. So as delusional as that sounds, that's what her inner circle believes. They see 2028 as her shot at redemption, but not everyone's convinced. Others worry about having this drawn out campaign against some heavy hitting Democrats who've been waiting in the wings. I say that Jared Polis of Colorado, the Democratic governor of Colorado, will run for president. Mark my words that he will run, and she will lose to him. Okay. What he's been able to do in the state of Colorado, in an area where was, a heavily red state for a long time, is now a heavily blue state. On election night, it immediately, as soon as they had those polls closed, it immediately went for Kamala Harris as a blue state. So that's Jared Polis. That's Jared Polis and his team. And I think that she'd have to go up against him in 2028. Good luck with that. So I don't know. And it could fizzle out, especially after if she has to go up against JD Vance. Good luck with that. So California's governor race seems like a slam dunk, in my opinion. She's a familiar face in the state. She's been elected statewide there 3 times, served as attorney general, then a senator, state of California. Plus, according to CNN, a lot of big name contenders for the job in California, if she were to run, would just step aside. They're like, okay, you got this. We're just not even going to try to run against you in California. But here's the big problem. As I was going through the math on this, right? She can't do both of these things. If she's the governor, if she goes for the governor's spot, she'd have to announce by this summer of 2025, okay? And then just a few months after, that's after President Trump takes office in the spring, in January. If she wins, then she'd be stuck juggling both the demands of being a new governor and at the same time then trying to launch a presidential campaign simultaneously. Would Californians be okay with that? Like, hey, we just got a new governor, and she's already looking to leave the job, and she's campaigning fully across the United States to be president of the United States. So why did we just elect her as our governor? Like, she's going to have to pick one or the other here. There's no way you can do both of these things. I don't know. Probably not. She's not going to be able to do it. But anyway.
But I think the rest of the country is like, have her, California. If you're going to do that to yourself, then you've done that to yourself, and we can't, so. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. There's a lot of Californians watching right now. They're like, no, please, no.
My father would just, oh my God, he'd had an aneurysm.
Yeah, he would. Oh no.
He's a California Republican, one of the few. Okay, well, ABC News settled its case with President-elect Trump, and they will pay $15 million to the Trump Presidential Library. This was the case where President Trump had sued them because George Stephanopoulos had repeatedly said that when he interviewed Nancy Mace, that President Trump had been found liable for rape, which was incorrect. He was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in the E. Jean Carroll case. And recall that the state of New York had to change the law so that E. Jean Carroll could bring that case because the statute of limitations had long since been passed. ABC News released a statement about this saying, quote, "We are pleased that the parties have reached an agreement to dismiss the lawsuit on the terms in the court filing." Now, it's no wonder then that ABC is treading extra carefully while they've been litigating and trying really hard to say true things, even when they don't want to. Now, recall that The View is hosted on ABC. It's an ABC show. That's why they have repeatedly had to be reading legal notes when they try to take underhanded hits at Trump nominees, such as this one, where Sonny Hostin had to say this about Pete Hegseth.
I have a very quick statement. It's not going to be that quick. Pete Hegseth has denied any wrongdoing. His lawyer said he paid the woman in 2023 to head off the threat of a baseless lawsuit. No charges were ever brought. You rushed me for that?
It's really hamstringing their ability to hit at them when
They have to keep doing legal
then
notes, yeah.
tell the truth. Here's another one that they had to. This was one of the first that they had to do about Matt Gaetz.
I have a legal note. You want to take this one, Joy, or you Matt Gaetz has long denied all allegations and has not been charged with any crime. That's true. Also, another legal note, Pete Hegseth's lawyer said he paid the woman in 2023 to head off the threat of a baseless lawsuit. He has denied any wrongdoing.
That's interesting. Pay off the witness.
She's like, be quiet now. Be quiet now.
You're going to ruin our legal note.
Yeah. Okay. So they're pissed that they have to do this and they can't just impugn people's characters without consequences. As part of the settlement, ABC had to publish this on the original Nancy Mace interview, saying ABC News and George Stephanopoulos regret statements regarding President Donald J. Trump made during this interview on March 10th. So I bet they regret it to the tune of $15 million. But President-elect Trump, I think, is maybe a little bit high on this win because now he's threatening lawsuits against the Des Moines Register over its final election poll showing Trump that was losing several points to Kamala Harris in the run-up in the weekend before the election. He's also said that he may sue CBS for editing the Kamala Harris interview, even though that really didn't have anything to do with that. I think the FEC should take a look at that. Other regulatory bodies. I'm not thrilled with the idea of Donald Trump just punishing people that he doesn't like because we need a free press. We need free speech, right? And so it would be interesting. Did this woman at the Des Moines Register do fake science? Did she manipulate the numbers? Is it her right to do that, right? So I do want to see the press have a higher commitment to truth, but does this fall into the category of protected speech? Are you allowed to just get it wrong, right? Maybe her math models were wrong. You see what I'm saying? This is a slippery slope. Like, we definitely want the media to do better, but they need to be free to do better.
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, as a Lil Jun fan in our chat says, defamation is a thing. It is a thing, but it's a very high bar for a person, a public person,
a public figure,
right? A private person has a much easier time suing for defamation, but a public figure, you would have to, I think you have to improve intent. Mm-hmm. With malicious intent, like you have to knowingly print that you knew that this was false information, and then you printed it on purpose to maliciously hurt that person.
Right.
It's a very high bar to prove.
Yeah. I'm just how you could serve discovery on the Des Moines Register and say, what were your numbers? Did you do something that you don't normally do because you didn't like the outcome of this, and then you were affecting the outcome? That one's tricky. We would need a constitutional lawyer to look at that in order to see if that was right or wrong. So he can say that and maybe rough them up a little. It's his free speech to scare them, I suppose. But we definitely don't want restrictions on the press. So yeah, this one's tricky. Let me know what you think. Redacted is brought to you by the Wellness Company. They're a longtime sponsor of independent media.
Kofi, follow me.